You know, sometimes life throws you a curveball so sharp, so unexpected, it shatters your entire perception of reality. You're standing there perfectly confident, believing in the solidity of your world, and then, in an instant, everything you thought was true crumbles to dust. Imagine being 8 months pregnant, every movement a challenge, every breath a conscious effort. And yet, the deepest ache isn't in your swollen feet or aching back. It's in your soul. It's the profound, chilling realization that the person you trusted most, the partner who vowed to stand by you, has not only betrayed you but is actively working to destroy you. This isn't just a story about a broken marriage. It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a stark illustration of how insidious emotional manipulation can be, and a powerful reminder that justice, though sometimes delayed, can indeed prevail. What Cassandra Donovan faced in that sterile courtroom wasn't merely a legal battle. It was a psychological war zone, a public execution of her dignity, orchestrated by the very man who was supposed to be her protector. It was a scene ripped from the pages of a suspense novel, but for Cassandra, it was terrifyingly, brutally real. The air in the courtroom on that fateful day was colder than ice, a chill that seemed to seep into Cassandra's very bones, despite the sweat trickling down her back. Each shift in the hard wooden chair was a fresh agony. At 8 months pregnant, comfort was a distant memory, but this was torture on an entirely different level. It was the torture of being present, of having to endure. And behind her, the venomous whispers of Jessica, Roland's mistress, cut through the oppressive silence like shards of broken glass. "Look at her," Jessica hissed, her voice carefully modulated to be just loud enough for everyone to hear, a calculated theatricality that was as chilling as it was brazen. "She can barely fit in that chair. No wonder Roland left her." A gasp, an audible intake of breath, might have been Cassandra's initial reaction if she hadn't been so numb. Instead, her hands instinctively tightened around her purse, her knuckles white, a silent anchor in a storm of humiliation. Her gaze remained fixed straight ahead, an unwavering stare at Judge Sanchez, who was meticulously reviewing documents, seemingly oblivious to the emotional violence unfolding in his courtroom. Her lawyer, Patricia Stone, a woman of formidable presence and sharp intellect, had warned her. "This will be ugly, Cassandra," Patricia had said, her voice grave, her eyes conveying a depth of understanding that Cassandra had come to rely on. "Roland's team is playing dirty, and Jessica? She's their secret weapon of cruelty." And Jessica was proving Patricia right with every sneering word, every calculated gesture. This wasn't just about winning a divorce settlement. It was about crushing Cassandra, breaking her spirit, making her feel utterly worthless and alone. It was a spectacle of cruelty designed to publicly shame a pregnant woman. Then, Roland's lawyer, a man named Mr. Brighton, rose, a stack of papers clutched in his hand, his demeanor oozing self-righteous confidence. "Your Honor," he began, his voice smooth and authoritative, "my client maintains that Mrs. Donovan has become increasingly unstable since her pregnancy began. These hormonal changes have made her vindictive and irrational." As Brighton spoke, Cassandra felt a powerful kick against her ribs. Her unborn daughter, it seemed, was reacting to the torrent of lies, a tiny, furious protest from within. She instinctively placed a hand over her swelling belly, taking a deep, shuddering breath, trying to anchor herself in the calm Patricia had so strenuously advised. "Stay calm, no matter what they say," her lawyer's words echoed in her mind. But the accusations kept coming, each one a fresh stab. "She's been stalking my client and his new partner," Brighton continued, his voice escalating, "taking photos of their home, following them to restaurants. This behavior is dangerous for everyone involved, especially the unborn child." A choked whisper escaped Cassandra's lips. "That's a lie," directed at Patricia. "I know. Stay quiet," Patricia murmured back, her voice low and reassuring, but her eyes, usually so sharp, were now filled with a simmering anger. Behind them, Jessica let out another theatrical gasp, a performance honed to perfection. "Oh my God, she's talking to her lawyer again. See how paranoid she is." Several people in the gallery turned, their faces a mixture of curiosity and judgment. Cassandra felt a hot flush creep up her neck, a familiar wave of shame and frustration. This was exactly what they wanted. They wanted her to crack, to break down in public, to validate their cruel narrative of her instability. But then, a shift. Judge Sanchez looked up from his papers, his gaze piercing, cutting through the noise. "Miss Wright," he stated, his voice calm but firm, a clear warning in its tone. "You are not a party to these proceedings. Please remain silent, or I will have you removed from my courtroom." Jessica, momentarily stunned, managed a sickly sweet smile. "Sorry, Your Honor," she simpered. "I'm just concerned for everyone's safety." Cassandra recognized that smile. She had seen it 6 months ago, a chillingly innocent facade, when she found Jessica in her own bedroom, wearing her own robe, acting as if she belonged there. It was the same fake innocence that had so easily fooled Roland, causing him to casually discard 15 years of marriage as if it were nothing. The depth of that betrayal, the calculated deceit, still churned in Cassandra's stomach. Brighton pressed on, oblivious or uncaring of the judge's interjection. "Mrs. Donovan has also been making false accusations about marital assets. She claims my client has hidden money, but she has no proof. These are the desperate actions of a woman who knows she's losing everything." Patricia was on her feet instantly. "Objection, Your Honor. Mr. Brighton is making statements not in evidence." "Sustained," Judge Sanchez declared, a note of impatience in his voice. "Mr. Brighton, stick to the facts." "Of course, Your Honor," Brighton responded, unperturbed. "The fact is that Mrs. Donovan is 8 months pregnant and clearly not thinking straight. She needs help, not custody of an innocent child." Cassandra closed her eyes, a silent prayer escaping her lips. How had her life devolved into this chaotic, humiliating spectacle? Just 6 months ago, she was blissfully planning a nursery, poring over baby names with the man she believed loved her, a man who now sat 10 feet away, nodding in agreement as his lawyer viciously attacked her character and fitness as a mother. He watched, completely unmoved, as they tried to paint her as unstable, as unworthy. "She can't even take care of herself!" Jessica's voice, deliberately loud, cut through the courtroom, amplified by the microphones. "Look at her clothes. Look at how she's sitting. That baby deserves better this time." The gavel slammed down, a sharp, resounding crack that silenced the room. "Miss Wright, I warned you!" Judge Sanchez boomed, his patience clearly at an end. "One more outburst, and you will be removed." But Jessica, fueled by an almost pathological need for dominance, wasn't done. She had been building to this moment for weeks, her audacity growing with each court appearance. Today, she was going for the kill. "I'm just saying what everyone is thinking," Jessica declared, standing up in the gallery, her gaze fixed on Cassandra, a triumphant glint in her eyes. "She's pathetic. No wonder Roland fell in love with someone else." The words hit Cassandra like a physical blow, a vicious punch to her already fragile core. The baby kicked again, harder this time, a visceral reaction to her mother's escalating stress. Cassandra forced herself to breathe slowly, in and out, just as she had been taught in the birthing classes she now attended alone, a grim reminder of the shattered future she was living. Then Roland finally spoke up, not to defend his wife, not to protect the mother of his child, but to support Jessica, the woman who had torn their lives apart. "Your Honor, my fiancé is only trying to protect my child. Cassandra has been saying terrible things about both of us. She's trying to poison people against us." Fiancé. The word twisted Cassandra's stomach. They hadn't even finalized the divorce, and Roland was already planning his next wedding. Jessica, basking in his validation, flashed a newly acquired diamond ring, catching the courtroom lights. Cassandra recognized it, the same ring she had seen in the jewelry store downtown, a ring that cost more than her entire grocery budget for 6 months. The sheer audacity, the blatant disregard for her feelings, for their shared history, for the very child growing inside her, was breathtaking. "Your Honor," Patricia stood again, her voice betraying none of her inner turmoil, "I would like to request a brief recess. My client is in her 3rd trimester and needs a moment." Judge Sanchez looked at Cassandra, and for a fleeting instant, she thought she saw sympathy in his eyes. 10-minute recess, he announced. As the courtroom began to stir, people rising from their seats, Jessica, with a predatory grace, walked past Cassandra's table. She paused, leaning down, feigning to pick something up from the floor. her proximity an invasion of Cassandra's space. "You should have seen this coming," she whispered, her voice dripping with cruel satisfaction. "A man like Roland was never going to stay with someone like you forever. I'm everything you're not. Younger, prettier, and I actually care about my appearance." Cassandra finally looked up, her gaze meeting the woman who had systematically dismantled her life. Jessica was beautiful, undeniably so, but in a sharp, artificial way. Perfect blonde hair, flawless makeup, expensive clothes that screamed designer, all meticulously curated. But in her eyes, Cassandra saw something cold, something utterly devoid of warmth or empathy, a quality that made her skin crawl. "You won't win this," Jessica continued, her voice gaining strength. "Roland and I have everything planned out. Your little girl is going to grow up knowing who really loves her father." That was the final straw. Not the lies about the hidden money, not the fake psychiatric evaluation, not even the public humiliation, which had been designed to break her down. No, threatening her unborn daughter, daring to claim a bond with Zoe that she had no right to, crossed a line Cassandra didn't even know existed. A primal instinct, fierce and protective, surged through her. She stood up as best she could, her hand instinctively shielding her belly. Her voice, though a whisper, carried the weight of a mother's unshakable resolve. "Stay away from my child." Jessica laughed, a brittle, triumphant sound. "Your child? Honey, that baby is going to be living with us half the time. I'm going to be her stepmother whether you like it or not." Patricia, ever vigilant, quickly stepped between them. "That's enough, Jessica. Please return to your seat." But Jessica, high on her own sense of victory, wasn't finished. She had been waiting months for this moment, for the chance to say these words directly to Cassandra's face. "I hope you enjoy these last few weeks," she hissed, her voice barely audible but brimming with malice. "Because once that baby is born, everything changes. Roland will get custody, and you'll be lucky if you see her on weekends." As Jessica sauntered away, a cloud of expensive, overwhelming perfume lingering in her wake, Cassandra sank back into her chair, her body trembling. Everything about Jessica was too much, too bright, too confident, too aggressively perfect. And somehow, that manufactured confidence seemed to be working in court. Cassandra's gaze drifted across the room to Roland. He was smiling at something on his phone, probably a text from Jessica. He looked relaxed, happy, as if this brutal fight for their child's future was just another day at the office, an inconsequential event. The callousness was a fresh wound. The 10 minutes of recess felt like 10 hours. When Judge Sanchez returned, Cassandra forced herself to sit straighter, despite the ache in her back and the swelling in her feet. She felt utterly alone, but a new, steel-like resolve had hardened within her. She had to keep fighting. Not for herself, and certainly not for Roland, but for the tiny girl growing inside her, the daughter who deserved better than a father who chose his mistress over his family, over integrity, over loyalty. As the proceedings resumed, Cassandra made herself a solemn promise. No matter what Jessica said, no matter how many lies Roland told, she would not break down. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her fall apart. She had no idea that in just a few minutes, everything would dramatically change, turning the tide of this seemingly unwinnable battle. 6 months earlier, Cassandra's world had been a symphony of quiet joy. She hummed softly as she made breakfast, the pregnancy test tucked secretly in her purse, its positive result a private, wondrous revelation. After 3 years of trying, of dashed hopes and whispered prayers, she was finally going to have a baby. At 32, she had started to worry it might never happen. Now her mind raced with plans. How to tell Roland the good news. Maybe she'd put the test in a tiny gift box or bake it into a cake. She'd seen so many cute ideas on Pinterest, wives surprising their husbands with miniature baby shoes, or a onesie proclaiming, "Daddy's little girl." Roland would be so excited. They had talked about children since their second date, 15 years ago. It felt like a lifetime of shared dreams. The coffee maker beeped, a familiar sound of domestic ritual, and Cassandra poured Roland's usual cup. Black, no sugar, in the chipped blue mug his mother had given him for Christmas. 15 years. 15 years of making his coffee every morning, and the small, intimate act still filled her with a quiet happiness, a sense of nurturing the man she loved. "Roland, breakfast is ready," she called upstairs, her voice light with anticipation. No answer. He was probably in the shower, she thought, a faint smile playing on her lips. She began making eggs, his favorite way, over easy, the yolks still runny, concentrating on not breaking the delicate yellow centers. So focused was she on this small task, this domestic idol, that she didn't hear his phone buzzing insistently on the kitchen counter. Text after text. A cascade of notifications, each one illuminating the screen with a stark, intrusive glow. Finally, Cassandra glanced over. The messages were from someone named Jess. "Can't wait to see you tonight, Roland. You left your watch here. I'm wearing that red dress you like." Cassandra's hand, suspended over the frying pan, froze. Jess. She knew that name. Jessica Wright. She worked at Roland's accounting firm. Cassandra had met her 3 months ago at the company Christmas party. A blonde woman with perfect predatory teeth who had spent the entire evening laughing too loudly at Roland's mediocre jokes, her gaze lingering on him a little too long. The eggs began to burn, the acrid smell of scorched food filling the kitchen, mirroring the sudden burning sensation in Cassandra's gut. She turned off the heat, her movements robotic, and slowly, deliberately picked up Roland's phone. In 15 years of marriage, she had never once looked through his messages, never felt the need to. They trusted each other implicitly, or so she had believed. There were dozens of messages from Jessica, spanning weeks, months. Cassandra scrolled up, her stomach churning, the nausea of infidelity far worse than any morning sickness. Photos. Jessica in revealing lingerie. Jessica in Cassandra's own kitchen, making coffee in the very blue mug Cassandra was holding. Jessica, wearing one of Roland's work shirts and nothing else. "Hey, babe, what's for breakfast?" Roland's voice, startlingly casual, came from behind her. Cassandra didn't turn around. She couldn't. She just kept reading, each message a fresh horror, a deeper cut. Plans to meet at discreet hotels, snide complaints about how boring Cassandra was, how she dressed like an old lady and never wore makeup anymore. Jessica referring to her as the wife, like some annoying obstacle to be circumvented, a temporary inconvenience. "Cassandra, you okay?" She finally turned to face her husband. He stood there, dressed in the gray suit she had bought him for his birthday last year, his hair still damp from the shower. He looked exactly like the man she had fallen in love with in college, the man she married. But now she was seeing him clearly for the first time, stripped bare of all illusions. "Who is Jess?" she asked, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. Roland's face instantly shifted. The casual smile evaporated, replaced by something guarded, cold, a mask of carefully constructed indifference. "What do you mean?" "Your phone has been buzzing all morning," Cassandra continued, holding up the phone, her hand trembling. "Messages from someone named Jess." "Oh, that's just a coworker," Roland dismissed, too quickly, too easily. "We're working on a project together." Cassandra held up the phone so he could see the screen. The latest message was a photo of Jessica, clearly naked under white sheets, a triumphant smirk on her face. "This kind of project?" Roland lunged for the phone, but Cassandra instinctively stepped back, holding it away from him. "Cassandra, I can explain." "Explain what?" she countered, her voice finally breaking. "That you're sleeping with Jessica, right? That she's been in our house, in our bed?" "It's not what you think," he pleaded, but it was exactly what she thought, and it was worse. Cassandra kept scrolling, the timeline of betrayal laid bare. The affair had been going on for 4 months. 4 months of calculated lies, of whispered secrets, while Cassandra had been diligently trying to get pregnant with his child, their child, a symbol of their shared future. "She was here yesterday," Cassandra said, reading a message from Jessica thanking Roland for an amazing afternoon. "While I was at work, you brought her to our house." "Cassandra, please let me explain." "Explain what?" Her voice rose, raw with pain and disbelief. "That while I was at the doctor finding out I'm pregnant, you were texting another woman about meeting at a hotel?" The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Roland's face went white, the blood draining from it, revealing a terror that was almost comical in its suddenness. "You're pregnant?" Cassandra had imagined this moment 100 times. Roland picking her up, spinning her around in jubilant celebration, both of them crying happy tears, planning the nursery, eagerly calling their parents with the joyous news. Instead, he looked utterly terrified, as if she had just announced a terminal illness. "How pregnant?" he choked out. 2 months, she replied, the joy of the morning now a bitter, mocking memory. Roland sank heavily into one of the kitchen chairs, his head in his hands. Oh, God. Not the reaction she had hoped for. Not a flicker of happiness or wonder, just profound dismay. Cassandra looked at the phone again, at Jessica's brazen messages. Jessica complaining about Cassandra being clingy, about her boring texts regarding grocery lists and dinner plans, about her old lady clothes and lack of makeup. "She doesn't know about me, does she?" Cassandra asked, a chilling realization dawning on her. Roland didn't answer, his silence a resounding confirmation. "You told her we were separated," Cassandra continued, the pieces clicking into place. "That we were getting divorced. That's why she's so comfortable sending these photos. She thinks I'm your ex-wife, not your actual wife who's been making your coffee every morning for 15 years. The kitchen, once the heart of their home, suddenly felt too small, too suffocating. Cassandra needed air, but she couldn't stop reading the messages. Plans for Jessica to move in with Roland as soon as the divorce was final. Plans for romantic trips they would take together. Plans for an entire future that conspicuously excluded Cassandra. A future that Roland had meticulously woven with another woman while simultaneously creating a new life with her. "When were you going to tell me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "When were you going to mention that you wanted a divorce?" "I don't want a divorce," Roland said quickly, too quickly. "Jessica is just... it's complicated." "What's complicated about adultery, Roland?" He stood up, tried to place his hands on her shoulders, a gesture of comfort now laced with sickening hypocrisy. Cassandra recoiled, stepping away, unable to bear his touch, not when his hands had been caressing Jessica. "Right. I love you," he stammered, his words hollow. "I love our life together. Jessica is just... she's different. She makes me feel young again." "I'm 32, Roland," Cassandra shot back, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "I'm not exactly ancient." "That's not what I meant," he said. But Cassandra was beginning to understand exactly what he meant. Jessica was 26, never married, with no stretch marks or worry lines. She didn't spend her evenings grading papers or making grocery lists. She was exciting in a way that Cassandra, after 15 years of marriage, apparently wasn't. She was novelty, a fleeting thrill, a stark contrast to the comfortable, predictable intimacy of a long-term partnership. "I can end it," Roland pleaded, grasping at straws. "I'll tell Jessica it's over. We can work through this." Cassandra looked down at the phone again. The most recent message from Jessica was from this very morning, sent while Cassandra was humming and making breakfast. "Can't wait to start our real life together." Their real life. Like the life Cassandra and Roland had built together for 15 years, the life filled with shared dreams, laughter, and now, a baby, was nothing more than a temporary illusion, something to endure until Jessica came along. "She thinks you're leaving me," Cassandra said, the realization a fresh wave of pain. "I told her I was thinking about it," Roland admitted, his voice barely audible. The honesty was worse than the lies. Cassandra sank into the chair Roland had just vacated, trying to process his words. He had been thinking about leaving her. While she was diligently taking prenatal vitamins, reading books about baby names, and planning for their child, he was meticulously planning to abandon their marriage, to jettison her and their entire shared history. "How long have you been thinking about leaving me?" she asked, her voice thin and fragile. Roland didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "Since before I met Jessica." That hurt more than all the photos and messages combined. The affair wasn't some sudden mistake, some moment of weakness or impulsive passion. Roland had been profoundly unhappy in their marriage for months, perhaps even years, and had never once said a word to her about it. He had allowed her to live in a gilded cage of illusion, to believe in a love that had already died within him. "Why didn't you tell me you were unhappy?" Cassandra asked, the question a desperate plea for understanding. "I didn't want to hurt you," he offered, a weak, pathetic excuse. So instead, she countered, her voice rising, you decided to cheat on me, to lie to your girlfriend about being separated, and to get me pregnant while planning your escape? When Roland put it like that, it sounded even worse, a grotesque tableau of deceit. Cassandra stood up again, moving to the window. Their backyard looked the same as it had yesterday morning. The swing set they had bought for their future children, the garden they had planted together last spring, the life they had carefully cultivated. But everything else had irrevocably changed. That life, that shared dream, apparently meant nothing to him. "I'll end it with Jessica," Roland said again, a desperate attempt to salvage what was already lost. "We can go to counseling. We can fix this." Cassandra turned to face him, her eyes cold and clear. "Can you fix 4 months of lying, Roland? Can you fix bringing another woman into our bed, into our home? Can you fix telling her that our marriage was over when I didn't even know there was a problem?" "We can try," he said. But Cassandra was done trying. She looked at the pregnancy test still clutched in her purse and made a decision that would change everything. A decision that stemmed from the deepest well of self-preservation and newfound strength. "No," she said, her voice firm and resolute. "We can't." The hours that followed were a blur of raw emotion and fractured reality. Cassandra spent the morning in her car, parked outside the library, calling in sick to work, her mind reeling, trying desperately to piece together the shattered fragments of her life. Going home felt impossible. The house, once a sanctuary, was now contaminated, tainted by Jessica's presence. Facing her students, engaging in the intellectual demands of her job, felt equally unattainable when her own world had imploded. She could barely keep herself together, let alone guide young minds through literature. Without consciously deciding, she found herself driving to her sister Linda's house, a familiar refuge 20 minutes away. Linda lived in a neighborhood that still felt safe, normal, untouched by the kind of profound betrayal Cassandra was experiencing. When Linda answered the door and saw Cassandra's ashen face, the raw pain etched in her eyes, she didn't hesitate. She immediately pulled Cassandra inside, her own face etched with concern. "What happened?" Linda asked, guiding her sister gently to the couch. Cassandra had planned to explain everything calmly, rationally, to articulate the series of events in a coherent narrative. But as soon as she tried to speak, the words came tumbling out in a torrent. The pregnancy test, the damning messages on Roland's phone, the explicit photos of Jessica in their bed, the horrifying plans Roland and Jessica had made for their real life together. Linda listened, her face growing steadily angrier, her silence a powerful validation of Cassandra's pain. When Cassandra finally finished, breathless and emotionally exhausted, Linda remained quiet for a long moment, absorbing the magnitude of the betrayal. "What are you going to do?" Linda finally asked, her voice low and steady. "I don't know," Cassandra confessed, the weight of the unknown almost unbearable. "You know what I think you should do," Linda stated, her meaning clear. Cassandra did know. Linda had never been Roland's biggest fan, always seeing through his carefully constructed facade. She thought he was too controlling, too concerned with outward appearances, too eager to project an image of success while giving little emotional depth. Years ago, Linda had warned Cassandra that Roland expected too much and gave too little in return, advice Cassandra, blinded by love, had dismissed. "I'm pregnant," Cassandra whispered, her voice cracking. "I'm 8 weeks pregnant with his child." "All the more reason to leave him now," Linda retorted, her voice sharp with conviction, "before things get even more complicated." But leaving felt impossible. Cassandra had been with Roland since she was 17, literally half her life. She didn't know how to navigate adulthood without him. Their finances were inextricably combined. Their friends were shared. Their entire world was intricately built around their identity as a couple. The thought of dismantling that edifice, of carving out a new, solitary existence, was terrifying. "What if he really does end it with her?" Cassandra asked, clinging to a fragile thread of hope. "What if we can work through this?" Linda gave her a look that spoke volumes, a look of weary exasperation tempered by fierce sisterly love. "Cassandra, honey, he's been lying to you for 4 months. He told another woman he was leaving you. He brought her into your house, into your bed. This isn't some mistake he made. This is who he chose to be." Cassandra knew Linda was right. Intellectually, she understood, but knowing and accepting were two entirely different things. She had spent 15 years building a life with Roland. They had plans, dreams of growing old together, of raising children in their home. The sudden, brutal demolition of those dreams left her reeling. "I should go home," Cassandra finally said, forcing herself to move. "We need to talk about this properly." "Do you want me to come with you?" Linda offered, her hand resting on Cassandra's arm. "No," Cassandra replied, a flicker of renewed resolve in her eyes. "This is something I have to do myself." But when Cassandra arrived home, a knot tightened in her stomach. She wasn't alone. Jessica's sleek silver BMW was parked brazenly in her driveway, looking as if it belonged there. Through the front window, Cassandra could see Jessica, casually seated at her kitchen table, the very table where Cassandra had eaten breakfast just hours before. Jessica was wearing a provocative red dress that accentuated her figure, and she was laughing, a bright, insouciant sound at something Roland was saying. Cassandra sat in her car for a few minutes, watching them, an agonizing tableau of betrayal. They looked comfortable together, natural, as if this was their house, their life, and Cassandra was the unwelcome intruder. The inversion of reality was dizzying. Finally, she got out of the car and walked to her own front door. She used her key, but the simple act of unlocking her own home felt alien, as if she needed permission to enter. The laughter stopped abruptly as soon as she walked into the kitchen. Jessica looked up, her expression shifting from surprise to something that might have been a flicker of guilt, quickly masked. Roland stood up quickly, a deer caught in headlights. "Cassandra, I thought you were at work." "I called in sick," she replied, her voice eerily calm, controlled. Jessica remained seated at the table, radiating an air of entitlement. She had made herself coffee, in Cassandra's favorite mug, the one with the chip on the handle that Cassandra had been meaning to replace for months. The mundane detail of the chipped mug, now defiled by Jessica's lips, felt like an unbearable violation. "Hi, Cassandra," Jessica purred, a smile playing on her lips that didn't quite reach her cold eyes. "Roland told me you weren't feeling well." The casualness, the audacity of it, sent Cassandra's blood pressure spiking. They were acting as if they were all friends, having a normal conversation, as if Jessica wasn't the woman who had been systematically sleeping with Cassandra's husband for 4 months, planning to dismantle her life. "What are you doing in my house?" Cassandra demanded, her voice cutting through the manufactured civility. Jessica looked at Roland, expecting him to handle this inconvenient interruption. When he remained silent, frozen, she answered for herself. "Roland invited me over to talk. We thought it would be good for all of us to clear the air." Clear the air. As if this were some minor misunderstanding, a trivial disagreement, rather than a devastating act of adultery that had shattered Cassandra's world. "Get out!" Cassandra said, her voice low but firm, a nascent fury simmering beneath the surface. "Cassandra," Roland started, but she cut him off. "I said get out! This is my house. I didn't invite you here." Jessica looked genuinely shocked, as if Cassandra's bluntness was an unforgivable breach of etiquette. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Jessica said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Roland and I care about each other. We didn't mean for it to happen, but sometimes these things are bigger than all of us." The way she spoke, portraying their affair as some grand, irresistible romantic destiny rather than a calculated choice born of deceit and disrespect, made Cassandra want to scream. There was no misunderstanding. This was a deliberate act of betrayal, a conscious choice to hurt people. "There's no misunderstanding," Cassandra stated, her voice trembling with barely suppressed rage. "You're sleeping with my husband in my house, in my bed. I want you to leave right now." "Cassandra, please," Roland interjected weakly. "We're all adults here. We can handle this maturely." But Cassandra was done being mature. She was done being understanding, polite, or reasonable. She was 8 weeks pregnant, reeling from a monumental betrayal, and her husband was asking her to be polite to his mistress in her own home. "Maturely?" she scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her. "You want me to handle this maturely? You've been lying to me for 4 months. You brought your girlfriend into our house while I was at work. You told her we were separated when we're not. And now you want me to sit down and have a friendly chat with her?" Jessica stood up from the table, her composure starting to crack. Look, I know this is hard for you, but Roland and I love each other. We're not trying to hurt anyone." "You love each other?" Cassandra turned her gaze, cold and accusing, to Roland. "You love her?" Roland looked profoundly uncomfortable, squirming under her gaze, but he didn't deny it. "Cassandra, my feelings for Jessica don't change what we have together." "What we have together?" Cassandra laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "What exactly do we have together, Roland? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like we have 15 years of lies and a pregnancy you're not happy about." Jessica's eyes widened, a dawning realization in their depths. "You're pregnant?" Roland hadn't told her. Of course he hadn't. That would complicate his carefully laid plans to leave his wife for his younger, more exciting girlfriend. "Yes," Cassandra confirmed, a defiant glint in her eyes. "I'm pregnant with his child." Jessica looked at Roland, an expression crossing her face that Cassandra couldn't quite decipher. Surprise, certainly, but also something else. Anger, maybe, or a chillingly calculating assessment of her suddenly precarious position. "How pregnant?" Jessica asked, her voice tight. 8 weeks? Jessica did the math quickly. 8 weeks ago, Roland had been telling her he was ready to leave his marriage, making plans for their future together. "You were trying to get pregnant while you were planning to leave me?" Cassandra demanded, turning back to Roland, the full horror of his deceit crashing down on her. "It wasn't planned," he mumbled. "The pregnancy was an accident." An accident. The word pierced Cassandra's heart like a poisoned arrow. That morning she had been overflowing with joy, dreaming of a future with this baby. Now her husband was callously dismissing their child, a symbol of their broken vows, as an accident in front of his mistress. "Get out," Cassandra said again, her voice low and dangerous, this time encompassing both of them. "Both of you, get out of my house right now." "Cassandra, this is my house too," Roland argued, a flicker of his old entitlement returning. "Then I'll leave," Cassandra declared, starting toward the stairs, a desperate urge to escape the toxic atmosphere. But Jessica's voice stopped her. "You don't have to leave," she said, her tone almost conciliatory, but with an underlying steel. "Roland and I were just talking about how to handle this situation. We want to do what's best for everyone." "What's best for everyone?" Cassandra turned around, her eyes narrowed. "What would that be exactly?" Jessica and Roland exchanged a look, a subtle, conspiratorial glance that made Cassandra's stomach churn anew. They had been discussing her, making plans for her life, without her input, without her presence. It was the ultimate act of disrespect, of dehumanization. "We think you should know that Roland and I are serious about each other," Jessica said, her voice firm, taking control of the narrative. "This isn't just some affair. We're planning a future together." "Jessica," Roland interjected quietly, a note of warning in his voice. But Jessica wasn't listening to him anymore. She had seized the reins, determined to assert her dominance. "I know this is hard to hear," Jessica continued, her gaze unwavering, "but Roland has been unhappy in your marriage for a long time. He stayed because he didn't want to hurt you, but we can't keep pretending anymore." Cassandra looked at Roland, a fresh wave of hurt washing over her. "Is that true? You've been unhappy for a long time?" She waited, her heart pounding, for him to deny it, to contradict Jessica's cruel assertion. "Cassandra," he began, then paused, taking a deep breath. "Answer the question, Roland. Have you been unhappy in our marriage?" "Yes," he said, the single word, simple and stark, hitting harder than any of Jessica's grand pronouncements. Cassandra had been happy, even through the stresses of work or financial worries, even during their arduous journey to get pregnant. She had been profoundly happy with their life together, with him. She had never, not once, suspected that he felt differently. "How long?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "I don't know," he replied evasively. "A couple of years, maybe?" A couple of years. While Cassandra had been diligently planning their future, their family, their shared life, Roland had been systematically planning his escape, his betrayal. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I thought it would get better," he mumbled. "I thought maybe if we had a baby." "You thought having a baby would fix our marriage?" Cassandra finished, a bitter taste in her mouth. "I thought it might help," he said, the faint hope in his voice a mockery of her pain. Cassandra felt sick, Not from morning sickness, but from the kind of profound nausea that comes from realizing your entire life has been built on a foundation of lies, a carefully constructed illusion. So, you let me keep trying to get pregnant while you were sleeping with someone else? The affair with Jessica started after we had been trying for a while, he clarified, a feeble attempt to mitigate his guilt. I was confused about what I wanted. Jessica stepped closer to Roland, taking his hand, a small but deliberate gesture of possession. She was marking her territory, staking her claim. We want to handle this the right way, Jessica said, her voice regaining its confident edge. We don't want anyone to get hurt unnecessarily. Unnecessarily? Cassandra stared at her, incredulous. What would be necessary hurt versus unnecessary hurt? We think it would be best if you and Roland separated quietly, Jessica continued, oblivious to Cassandra's sarcasm. That way the baby can have a stable environment with both parents involved. The baby. Jessica was already planning how to manage Cassandra's unborn child, inserting herself into the most intimate aspects of Cassandra's life. You think my baby should have a stable environment with her father and his mistress? Cassandra challenged, her voice rising in disbelief. I'm not going to be his mistress much longer, Jessica shot back, a triumphant gleam in her eyes. We're planning to get married as soon as your divorce is final. Cassandra looked at Roland, the cold, hard truth of his betrayal crystallizing before her. You're planning to marry her? We've talked about it, he confirmed, avoiding her gaze. Before or after you found out I was pregnant, Cassandra pressed. Roland didn't answer. Jessica, seizing the opportunity, answered for him. We've been talking about marriage for weeks. Weeks. While Cassandra had been diligently taking prenatal vitamins, reading pregnancy books, and dreaming of a future with their child, Roland and Jessica had been planning their wedding, building a new life on the ashes of Cassandra's marriage. I want both of you out of my house, Cassandra said, her voice trembling with barely controlled fury. Right now. This is my house, too, Roland argued again, clinging to his last vestiges of control. Then call your lawyer, Cassandra retorted, her gaze unwavering. Because as of right now, I'm filing for divorce. And with those words, a decisive, irreversible line was drawn. The lawyer's office smelled of worn leather and a heavy sense of disappointment, a fitting backdrop for the unraveling of a life. Patricia Stone was nothing like Cassandra had expected. Young, perhaps in her early 30s, with a shock of short, fiery red hair and eyes of an intense, intelligent green, she radiated competence and an almost fierce dedication. Her office walls were adorned with awards, framed photos of her with various judges and politicians, a silent testament to her formidable reputation. How far along are you? Patricia asked as soon as Cassandra sat down, her voice crisp and direct, wasting no time on pleasantries. 12 weeks, Cassandra replied, the number feeling both impossibly long and terrifyingly short. And your husband knows about the pregnancy? Yes, Cassandra confirmed, her voice tightening. He called it an accident. Patricia made a swift note on her legal pad. In front of the other woman? Yes. Good, Patricia said, her expression hardening. That helps us establish his attitude toward the child. Cassandra had called 3 lawyers before finding Patricia. The first 2 had blandly suggested marriage counseling, oblivious to the depth of the betrayal. The third had asked, with a note of concern, if she was sure she wanted to proceed with a divorce while pregnant, implying she might be overly emotional or irrational. Only Patricia had cut through the noise, offering not pity, but a clear path forward. Here's what's going to happen, Patricia stated, her gaze unwavering, projecting an air of absolute control. Roland is going to try to paint you as unstable, pregnancy hormones, emotional distress, not thinking clearly. It's a standard playbook for cheating husbands. They try to delegitimize the wife's emotions, to make her seem crazy, so his actions appear less egregious. But I'm not unstable, Cassandra protested, a flicker of panic in her eyes. I know that, Patricia replied, her voice firm. You know that, but we need to make sure the judge knows that too. Patricia then meticulously outlined the arduous process that lay ahead. Temporary orders for support and custody, a grueling discovery phase to unearth all marital assets, depositions where everyone, including Jessica, would have to answer questions under oath, It would take months, perhaps even longer, if Roland decided to fight dirty, which, given his current trajectory, seemed highly likely. "What about Jessica?" Cassandra asked, her voice laced with a mixture of dread and defiance. "What about her? Can she testify against me?" Patricia smiled, a brief, sharp flash of humor that softened her features. "She can try, but adultery is still adultery, even in no-fault divorce states. It affects equitable distribution of assets and, crucially, a judge's perception of character. And if she's been helping your husband hide assets or make plans behind your back, that's going to bite them both." After the meeting, Cassandra drove to her new apartment. It was a tiny one-bedroom place, 20 minutes from the house she had shared with Roland, the house that was now, presumably, Jessica's domain. The rent was twice what she could realistically afford on her teacher's salary, but it was clean, safe, and located in a decent school district for when the baby got older. The apartment came furnished, a mismatched collection of basic items: a drab brown couch, a scuffed black coffee table, a bed that squeaked with every turn. Cassandra had brought 2 suitcases of clothes and a single box of books, a meager collection of her former life. Everything else was still at the house, with Roland and Jessica, a constant painful reminder of what she had lost. Cassandra tried not to think about Jessica sleeping in her bed, using her coffee maker, sitting at her kitchen table. But late at night, when the small apartment was quiet, the silence amplifying her fears, the images came unbidden. Jessica wearing Cassandra's bathrobe, redecorating the master bedroom, acting as if she had always lived there, effortlessly stepping into a life that was never hers. The worst part was how quickly it had all happened. Cassandra moved out on a Tuesday. By Friday, Jessica's car was parked in the driveway overnight. By the following Monday, Jessica was brazenly posting photos on social media from inside Cassandra's house. Pictures of herself cooking dinner in Cassandra's kitchen. Photos of herself and Roland cuddled on the couch Cassandra had picked out. "She's trying to get under your skin," Linda said, her voice filled with outrage when Cassandra hesitantly showed her the photos. "Don't let her, Cassandra. Don't give her the satisfaction." But it was working. Every photo felt like a fresh twist of the knife. Jessica was living the life Cassandra had built, sleeping with the man Cassandra had loved, existing in the very space where Cassandra was supposed to be raising her child. It was a calculated act of psychological warfare, designed to provoke, to dominate. The temporary custody order, a preliminary arrangement, granted Roland visitation rights once the baby was born. Cassandra would have full custody during the week, but Roland would get weekends, which meant Jessica would be around Cassandra's daughter every other weekend. "We can fight that later," Patricia had said, pragmatic as always. "Once the baby is born and we see how involved he actually wants to be, we'll reassess." But Cassandra couldn't stop thinking about it. Jessica changing her daughter's diapers, Jessica reading her bedtime stories, Jessica being called some version of mom by the child Cassandra was carrying, the child she was fighting for with every fiber of her being. The thought was a chilling prospect, a violation of the sacred bond she was forming with her daughter. At 16 weeks, Cassandra had her first ultrasound, alone. The technician, sensing the absence, politely asked if the father would be joining them. Cassandra, her voice tight with forced composure, had to explain that he wouldn't be. As she watched her daughter move on the screen, a tiny, vibrant life fluttering within her, she wished things were different, wished for the shared joy, the easy intimacy of a loving partner. The baby was healthy and active, the perfect size for her gestational age, with 10 tiny fingers and 10 tiny toes, and a strong, steady heartbeat that filled the ultrasound room with a reassuring rhythm. "Do you want pictures?" the technician asked gently. Cassandra ordered a whole packet. She wanted to remember this moment, this profound connection, even if she was experiencing it alone. Walking to her car afterward, she realized she was crying, not from sadness exactly, but from the overwhelming, often brutal, reality of what was happening. She was going to be a single mother. She was going to raise this child without the man she had planned to raise her with. The weight of that future pressed down on her, heavy and daunting. But then, looking at the ultrasound photo, a tiny, grainy image of burgeoning life, Cassandra felt something unexpected, a profound sense of relief. Her daughter wouldn't grow up watching her parents lie to each other, wouldn't think that cheating was normal or acceptable. She wouldn't learn that love meant staying with someone who didn't respect you, who didn't cherish you, who didn't fight for you. She would grow up knowing what true strength looked like. That night, Cassandra called her mother for the first time since the separation, finally ready to share her vulnerability and her tentative hope. "How are you holding up?" her mother asked, her voice filled with concern. "I'm okay," Cassandra replied, surprised by the honesty in her own voice. "Better than okay, actually. And the baby, she's perfect." Cassandra hadn't told her parents the baby was a girl yet. She hadn't told anyone except Linda. But saying it out loud, articulating that precious fact, made it feel real in a way that brought a genuine smile to her face. "She's a girl, Mom. She's due in October." "Cassandra, that's wonderful," her mother exclaimed, joy and relief evident in her voice. "What are you going to name her?" Cassandra had been thinking about names for weeks, seeking something strong yet feminine, a name that would serve her daughter well, whether she became a doctor, an artist, or anything in between. "I'm thinking about Zoe," she said, the name rolling off her tongue with a newfound sense of purpose. "It means life." "Zoe," her mother repeated, savoring the sound. "I love it." After they hung up, Cassandra sat in her small living room, looking around. The mismatched furniture, the thin walls, the view of the parking lot instead of a sprawling backyard. It wasn't the life she had planned for herself or her daughter, certainly not the idyllic suburban dream she had envisioned with Roland. But it was theirs. No lies, no secrets, no agonizing over whether the person sleeping next to her truly wanted to be there. Just Cassandra and Zoe, building something new together, a future defined by honesty, resilience, and unconditional love. The next morning, the fragile peace was shattered by a phone call. "We need to talk," Jessica said, her voice instantly recognizable, devoid of any preamble or introduction. "I don't think we do," Cassandra replied, her voice carefully neutral. "It's about the baby," Jessica persisted. Cassandra almost hung up, but something in Jessica's voice, not the usual smugness, but something harder to read, stopped her. "What about the baby?" "Roland and I have been talking about custody arrangements," Jessica continued, her tone laced with a chilling presumption of authority. "We want to make sure everything goes smoothly." "You want to make sure everything goes smoothly?" Cassandra retorted, incredulous. "You're not the father of my child. You don't get a say in custody arrangements." "I'm going to be in her life whether you like it or not," Jessica declared, her voice firm. "Roland and I are getting married next month. Next month. The divorce wouldn't even be final for another 4 months. But they were getting married next month. The audacity was breathtaking. "You can't get married while he's still married to me," Cassandra pointed out, stating the obvious legal fact. "We're having a commitment ceremony," Jessica smoothly countered. "Just something small with our families. The legal wedding will be later. A commitment ceremony. While Cassandra was 5 months pregnant with Roland's child. The sheer disrespect, the open flaunting of their relationship, was a constant psychological assault. "Why are you telling me this, Jessica?" Cassandra asked, weary of the games. "Because I want you to know that I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be Zoe's stepmother, and I think we should try to get along for her sake." Zoe. Jessica knew the baby's name. Roland had told her. It was another small, intimate detail of Cassandra's life that had been breached, shared with the woman who sought to erase her. "Stay away from my daughter," Cassandra commanded, her voice fierce. "I can't do that. She's going to be part of my family, too." "No, she's not." "Cassandra, I know you're angry, but we need to be practical," Jessica continued, her voice radiating an almost condescending reasonableness. "Roland and I are building a life together. Your daughter is going to be part of that life. We can do this the easy way or the hard way, but either way, it's happening." The confidence in Jessica's voice was infuriating, an unshakable belief that she had already won, and Cassandra just hadn't accepted it yet. It was the typical manipulative tactic of making the victim responsible for the perpetrator's actions. "The hard way it is, Jessica," Cassandra said, her voice firm, and hung up. Patricia's office had, by necessity, become Cassandra's second home. 3 times a week, she made the 20-minute drive downtown, each journey becoming progressively more uncomfortable as her pregnancy advanced. At 24 weeks, the physical strain was undeniable, but Cassandra never missed an appointment. These meetings were her lifeline, her strategic planning sessions in the war for her future. "Tell me about your finances again," Patricia requested, spreading bank statements across her desk. Cassandra had been through this a dozen times, each recitation a fresh agony of betrayal. But she methodically went through it again. Their joint checking account, their savings, Roland's retirement account from his accounting firm, the house they had bought together 5 years ago, now a battleground. "What about this withdrawal?" Patricia pointed to a line on their bank statement. $2,000 cash taken out the day before you separated. Cassandra leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "I don't know anything about that." "And this one," Patricia continued, pointing to another entry. $1,500, 3 days later. More withdrawals Cassandra hadn't made, and Roland hadn't mentioned. Patricia showed her 6 more, all taken in the 2 weeks after Cassandra moved out. "He's hiding money," Patricia concluded, her voice grim. "The question is, where?" They spent the afternoon meticulously poring over credit card statements and bank records. Slowly, painfully, a pattern emerged, a chilling revelation of Roland's methodical deception. He had been moving money for months, long before Cassandra had discovered the affair. Small amounts at first, almost imperceptible, then larger sums as his relationship with Jessica became more serious, more entrenched. It wasn't a spontaneous act, it was a premeditated financial bleed. "Look at this," Patricia said, pointing to a purchase at a high-end jewelry store. $3,000, paid the same day he took out that cash withdrawal. "The engagement ring," Cassandra whispered, the words catching in her throat, a fresh wave of nausea washing over her. Roland had bought Jessica an engagement ring with money from his joint account with Cassandra, money that was rightfully hers, money they had saved together for their future. "Can we prove this?" Cassandra asked, a desperate hope for justice sparking within her. "We're going to try," Patricia replied, a steely glint in her eyes. "I'm subpoenaing the jewelry store records. If he bought her a ring with marital funds, that's a gift to his mistress. The court won't like that one bit. It speaks to his character, his disregard for his marital obligations, and his financial dishonesty." Patricia had also uncovered evidence of other extravagant spending. Expensive dinners at restaurants Cassandra had never been to, lavish hotel rooms booked on nights when Roland claimed to be working late, a weekend trip to a luxurious ski resort that coincided with Cassandra's visit to her sister. Each expense was a thread in the tapestry of betrayal. "He's been planning this for a long time," Patricia concluded, her voice somber. "This wasn't some sudden, impulsive affair. He's been systematically preparing to leave you, financially and emotionally. He wasn't just cheating, he was building a new life for himself, on your dime." The evidence was overwhelming, an undeniable catalog of Roland's deceit. But it was also profoundly heartbreaking. Every credit card charge represented a lie Roland had told. Every cash withdrawal was money he had stolen from their shared future, from the stability Cassandra had envisioned for their family. It was a cold, hard illustration of emotional and financial abuse. "What about Jessica?" Cassandra asked, her voice tight. "Can we prove she knew about me, about the marriage?" Patricia smiled, a predatory gleam in her eyes. "Actually, yes. Look at this." She showed Cassandra a series of text messages, damning exchanges that Roland's lawyer had been forced to turn over during the discovery process. Messages between Roland and Jessica dating back to before Cassandra even knew about the affair. "She's asking him when he's going to tell his wife about the separation," Patricia read aloud, her voice deliberate. "This message is from 2 months before you found out. She knew he was lying to you, Cassandra. She was an active participant in his deception." The messages, painstakingly revealed, only grew worse. Jessica complaining about having to sneak around, asking when she could stop hiding their relationship, making brazen plans for after the wife was out of the picture. "They were planning your whole life without you," Patricia stated, her voice full of controlled outrage. "Jessica knew Roland was married. She knew you didn't know about the affair. She actively participated in the deception for months. That will not look good to a judge." This wasn't just adultery. It was a systematic, calculated invasion of Cassandra's life, a psychological torment designed to dismantle her world. At 28 weeks, Cassandra had another ultrasound. This time, she brought Linda with her for support, needing the comfort of her sister's presence. Zoe was growing perfectly, a vibrant, active presence within her, constantly moving, seemingly practicing her soccer kicks on Cassandra's ribs. "She's going to be feisty," the technician remarked, a smile playing on her lips. Cassandra hoped so. She wanted her daughter to be strong, resilient enough to handle whatever life threw at her, strong enough to stand up for herself, strong enough to never accept less than she deserved. She was fighting not just for custody, but for a future where Zoe knew her worth. After the appointment, Linda took Cassandra to lunch at a quiet cafe near the medical building, a rare moment of respite from the relentless legal battles. "How are you really doing?" Linda asked, her gaze filled with genuine concern. "Some days are better than others," Cassandra admitted, stirring her tea. "And Roland, has he tried to contact you?" "Only through lawyers," Cassandra replied. "Patricia says that's better. Anything he says to me directly can't be used in court. But sometimes," she confessed, a note of vulnerability in her voice, "I miss the contact." Not because she wanted Roland back, not in the slightest, but because 15 years of sharing everything with someone, even the mundane details of life, was a hard habit to break. She still found herself instinctively reaching for her phone to text him about doctor appointments or baby updates before the cold, hard realization of his betrayal crashed back down. "What about Jessica?" Linda pressed, her voice laced with distaste. "She called me last week," Cassandra sighed. "Wanted to discuss co-parenting arrangements." Linda's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "Please tell me you hung up on her." "I did," Cassandra confirmed. "But she's not going away. She really believes she's going to be Zoe's stepmother." "Over my dead body," Linda declared, her voice fierce with protective anger. Cassandra appreciated her sister's unwavering support, but Jessica wasn't entirely wrong about one thing. If Roland got significant visitation rights, Jessica would inevitably be around. There was no way to completely separate them from Zoe's life, a chilling prospect. "Patricia thinks we might be able to limit Jessica's contact with the baby," Cassandra offered, clinging to this small hope. "At least for the first few years. Courts don't like introducing new partners too quickly after divorce, especially when there's animosity and a young child involved." "Good," Linda grumbled. "That woman has no business being around your child." The next week, Patricia called with news, a rare glimmer of hope in the protracted battle. "Roland's lawyer wants to settle," she announced, her voice cautiously optimistic. "Settle how?" Cassandra asked, instantly suspicious. "He's offering you the house and half the retirement accounts," Patricia explained. "He keeps his business partnership and pays child support until Zoe turns 18. It sounded reasonable. Almost too good to be true. Cassandra had learned not to trust anything that sounded too easy, too advantageous. "What's the catch?" "He wants shared custody," Patricia revealed, the unspoken difficulty hanging in the air. 50-50 split." "No," Cassandra immediately declared, her voice firm. "I told him you'd say that," Patricia acknowledged. "But Cassandra, you need to be prepared. If we go to trial, there's a chance the judge might award him significant visitation anyway. Fathers have rights, even cheating fathers. We have to consider what's realistically achievable." Cassandra's hand instinctively moved to her belly. At 30 weeks, Zoe was running out of room to move around, but she was still active, especially at night when Cassandra was trying to sleep. The thought of sharing her, of ceding control, was unbearable. "What if we take the settlement, but negotiate the custody?" she proposed, a desperate attempt to find a middle ground. "What are you thinking?" Patricia asked, her tone encouraging. "He can have visitation, but not overnight visits until Zoe is older, maybe 2 or 3, and Jessica can't be alone with her, ever." Patricia was quiet for a moment, weighing the legal feasibility. "That's going to be hard to enforce, Cassandra. Proving Jessica was alone with the child, especially without explicit evidence, is challenging." "Then we don't settle," Cassandra stated, her voice hardening with resolve. "We go to trial. We fight for it." "Okay," Patricia conceded, sensing Cassandra's unwavering determination. "But I need to warn you about something. Jessica is planning to attend the trial. Roland's lawyer wants her there." "She's not a party to the divorce," Cassandra pointed out, the unfairness of it all rankling. "No, but she's allowed in the courtroom as a member of the public," Patricia explained, "and Roland's lawyer might call her as a witness." "To testify about what?" Cassandra asked, dread forming a cold knot in her stomach. Your mental state, your fitness as a mother? Patricia replied, her voice grim. They're going to argue that you're vindictive and unstable because of the pregnancy hormones, that you're weaponizing Zoe against Roland. Cassandra had been expecting this tactic, the predictable playbook of gaslighting and character assassination, but it still ignited a fierce anger within her. So, she gets to destroy my marriage and then testify about my mental health? That's the plan, Patricia confirmed. But here's the thing about Jessica. She's arrogant. She thinks she's smarter than everyone else in the room, particularly lawyers. If I can get her on the witness stand, I might be able to get her to say something that helps our case. Like what? Cassandra asked, a flicker of hope. Like admitting she knew about you all along, Patricia mused. Like admitting she and Roland have been planning this for months. Like admitting she's been spending marital funds on herself, funds that are technically yours. Patricia pulled out another stack of documents, the fruits of her meticulous investigation. I've been doing some digging into Jessica's finances. She's been living way above her salary for the past 6 months. Expensive clothes, a new car, a luxury apartment. Either she has a secret source of income, or someone's been helping her pay for things. You think Roland's been supporting her? Cassandra asked, her voice tight with renewed disgust. I think Roland's been supporting her with your money, Cassandra. And if I can prove that in court, it's going to make both of them look very bad to the judge. It shifts the narrative from a complicated love story to outright financial fraud and manipulation. As Cassandra drove home to her small apartment, a familiar sense of apprehension battled with something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not hope that she and Roland would reconcile, that dream was long dead, but hope that justice was possible, that the truth, ugly as it was, would matter. Hope that her daughter would grow up knowing her mother had fought for her, had refused to buckle under the weight of betrayal. At 32 weeks, Cassandra began the earnest preparations for Zoe's arrival, a quiet ritual of nesting in her small, temporary sanctuary. She bought a simple crib and a changing table, setting up the nursery in a corner of her bedroom. It wasn't the spacious, perfectly appointed nursery she had planned in the house with Roland, but it was theirs, a haven imbued with hope and love. Linda came over to help her assemble the furniture, their shared laughter and quiet conversation a comforting balm. Have you thought about what you're going to do after the baby comes? Linda asked, tightening a screw. Go back to work when my maternity leave is over, Cassandra replied, the practicalities of single parenthood a constant presence in her mind. Patricia thinks the child support will help, but it won't be enough to live on, not with this rent. What about daycare? Linda probed, knowing the immense financial and logistical burden it presented. Cassandra had been researching daycare centers, a daunting task. The good ones had interminable waiting lists. The affordable ones often had troubling reviews. It was another thing she had expected to figure out with Roland, another plan shattered by his betrayal. I'll figure it out, Cassandra said, a quiet determination in her voice. Single mothers do it all the time. You don't have to do it all alone, you know, Linda countered gently. Mom and I can help. We want to. I know, Cassandra replied, a soft smile touching her lips. And I'll take all the help I can get. But I want to be able to take care of Zoe myself, to the best of my ability. I want her to see that women can be strong and independent, that they don't need a man to provide for them or validate them. She's going to see that, Linda affirmed, placing a reassuring hand on Cassandra's shoulder. She's going to see her mother fighting for what's right and building a good life for both of them, completely on her own terms. That's a lesson worth more than any fancy house or perfect family portrait. That night, Cassandra placed her hands on her belly, a nightly ritual of connection. We're going to be okay, Zoe, she whispered, her voice filled with an unwavering belief. I don't know exactly how yet, but we're going to be okay. We'll find our way. Zoe kicked in response, a tiny affirmation from within, and Cassandra took it as agreement. The courthouse, on the morning of their first formal hearing, smelled of disinfectant and a pervasive underlying fear. Cassandra arrived early, her hands shaking slightly as she signed in with the clerk. At 36 weeks pregnant, walking was an effort, and sitting was a relentless discomfort, but she refused to let these physical challenges betray any hint of weakness. Patricia met her in the hallway, a reassuring presence amidst the swirling anxiety. "How are you feeling?" Patricia asked, her gaze assessing. "Like I might throw up or go into labor," Cassandra confessed, a nervous laugh escaping her. "Possibly both." "The throwing up is nerves," Patricia replied, a small smile playing on her lips. "Let's hope the labor waits until after we're done here. We have too much to accomplish today." Judge Sanchez was older than Cassandra had expected, with a shock of distinguished gray hair and kind eyes that seemed to take in everything, missing nothing. He reviewed the temporary custody petition, his expression unreadable, while the lawyers shuffled papers and whispered to their clients. Roland sat across the courtroom with his lawyer, Mr. Brighton. He looked nervous, his face pale but determined too. He had lost weight since the separation, the stress of the impending battle etching lines of worry on his face. He wore a new suit, one that Cassandra instinctively knew Jessica had picked out for him, a symbol of his new life, his new allegiance. "Mr. Brighton," Judge Sanchez began, his voice calm but firm, "your client is requesting shared custody of a child who hasn't been born yet." "Yes, Your Honor," Brighton responded, rising smoothly. "Mr. Donovan is committed to being an active father and wants to establish his parental rights from the very beginning. He seeks to participate fully in his child's life." "And Mrs. Donovan objects to this arrangement?" Judge Sanchez inquired, turning his gaze to Patricia. Patricia stood up, her posture regal. "Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Donovan is willing to allow reasonable visitation, but she believes shared custody is not in the child's best interest, given the circumstances of the separation and the father's current living situation." "What circumstances are those, Miss Stone?" the judge asked, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Mr. Donovan has been engaged in an extramarital affair for the past 8 months, Patricia stated, her voice clear and precise. He moved his girlfriend into the marital home immediately after Mrs. Donovan moved out. Mrs. Donovan is concerned about exposing a newborn, a vulnerable infant, to an unstable living situation, particularly one that arose from deceit and betrayal. Judge Sanchez looked at Roland, his expression unreadable, but a palpable tension filled the room. "Mr. Donovan, is it true that you're currently living with someone other than your wife?" "Yes, Your Honor," Roland admitted, his voice barely audible. "Someone you were involved with during your marriage?" Roland's lawyer whispered something to him, a frantic gesture of caution. But Roland, perhaps caught off guard, or simply choosing to plow ahead, answered anyway. "Yes, Your Honor." "And you want this court to award you overnight visitation with a newborn, a child who will be completely dependent on her mother's care and emotional stability?" "Yes, Your Honor," Roland insisted, his voice regaining a modicum of strength. "I love my child and want to be a part of her life." Judge Sanchez made a meticulous note on his pad, his silence amplifying the weight of Roland's admission. "The court appreciates your desire to be involved, Mr. Donovan. However, newborns have very specific, very demanding needs. Their schedules are often unpredictable, their sleep patterns erratic, and their dependence on a primary caregiver is absolute. Based on the current information and the circumstances surrounding your separation, I am going to order supervised visitation for the first 6 months, with the possibility of expansion based on how well things go. This is designed to allow you to build a bond with your child in a controlled environment and to demonstrate your capacity for independent care." Patricia squeezed Cassandra's hand under the table, a silent communication of victory. It was better than they had dared to hope for, a significant win for stability and for Zoe's well-being. "However," Judge Sanchez continued, his gaze sweeping across the courtroom, "I want to be clear that this is a temporary order. Once the child is born, and we can assess the actual situation rather than hypotheticals, we may revisit this arrangement. I will require regular reports from the Supervised Visitation Center, and I will be looking for clear evidence of your ability to care for a newborn independently, Mr. Brighton started to object, but Judge Sanchez held up his hand, silencing him with a commanding gesture. "Mr. Brighton, I've seen too many cases where parents use newborns as weapons against each other, where the child's best interests are secondary to parental grievances. This court's primary concern is the welfare of the child, not the convenience or emotional satisfaction of the parents. Supervised visitation for 6 months, then we'll reevaluate. That is my order." As they left the courtroom, Cassandra felt her first real moment of profound relief in months. Zoe would be safe, at least for the crucial first 6 months. Jessica wouldn't be alone with her daughter, wouldn't be able to insert herself into that delicate, foundational period of a newborn's life. But in the hallway, their brief reprieve was shattered. They ran into Roland and Mr. Brighton, and Jessica. "Congratulations!" Jessica sneered, her voice dripping with venom, her face contorted with barely concealed rage. "You got what you wanted, Cassandra. You manipulated the system." "Jessica, don't," Roland muttered, his voice quiet, a desperate plea. But Jessica was past caring, past any pretense of composure. She was angrier than Cassandra had ever seen her, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. 6 months of supervised visitation? Really? You're going to keep his own daughter away from him, Cassandra? How could you be so cruel? "I'm protecting my daughter from a situation that isn't stable, Jessica," Cassandra retorted, her voice firm, refusing to be drawn into the theatrics. "Stable?" Jessica scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Roland and I are getting married. We're more stable than you are. You're a single, hormonal, vindictive mother." "You're getting married while he's still married to me," Cassandra shot back, cutting through Jessica's self-serving narrative. "Your idea of stability is built on a foundation of lies and betrayal." "The marriage was over long before I came along," Jessica shrieked, her voice rising, drawing curious glances from passers-by in the hallway. Patricia, seizing this moment, stepped firmly between them, a formidable barrier. "This conversation is over, Jessica. You have no standing in these proceedings. You are not a party to this case, and your comments are irrelevant and inappropriate." "I will when I'm his wife," Jessica defiantly declared, her chest heaving. "That may be true someday," Patricia stated, her voice cold and unyielding. "But today, you're just the woman he was cheating with. And your behavior in the courtroom, and now in this public space, speaks volumes about your judgment and your fitness to be around a child in a vulnerable situation." Jessica's face flushed crimson, her anger exploding. "How dare you!" "Ladies," Mr. Brighton interjected, finally finding his voice, clearly mortified. "This isn't helping anyone." But the damage was done. Cassandra had seen Jessica's true face, stripped bare of all pretense, the raw anger, the entitled rage, the cruel vindictiveness that she usually kept hidden beneath a veneer of charm. More importantly, Patricia had seen it too, and she was already strategizing. "Did you get that on your recorder?" Patricia whispered to Cassandra, a knowing glint in her eyes as they walked away from the volatile scene. "You were recording?" Cassandra asked, surprised. "I always record conversations in courthouse hallways," Patricia replied, a wry smile playing on her lips. "You never know what people will say when they think no one important is listening, and Jessica just handed us a goldmine of evidence regarding her temperament and involvement." 3 days later, life, in its relentless unpredictability, intervened. Cassandra went into labor 2 weeks early, but not dangerously so. Linda, ever the steadfast sister, drove her to the hospital, making frantic phone calls to Patricia and Cassandra's doctor. "Should we call Roland?" Linda asked as they pulled into the bustling hospital parking lot, a note of uncertainty in her voice. "Not yet," Cassandra replied, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps, but her mind clear. She wanted to experience the birth of her daughter without drama, without the toxic presence of Roland's betrayal or Jessica's calculated intrusion. She wanted to focus solely on meeting Zoe, on the profound, sacred moment of becoming a mother, without the shadow of external worries. Zoe Patricia Donovan was born at 3:47 in the morning, after 6 hours of intense labor. She was perfect, 6 pounds, 3 ounces, with a delicate covering of dark hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything around her with an ancient wisdom. "She looks like you," Linda whispered, tears streaming down her face, a profound joy replacing the earlier anxieties. Cassandra held her daughter, this tiny, perfect being, and felt a love so fierce, so overwhelming, it literally took her breath away. This minuscule person was hers to protect, to raise, to cherish, to guide through life. Nothing else mattered as much as this moment, this profound, unshakable connection. "Hi, Zoe," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm your mom, and I'm going to love you with everything I have." Zoe, nestled against her mother's chest, seemed to focus on her voice, her tiny fingers curling around Cassandra's. It felt like their first real conversation, a silent pact of unconditional love. 4 hours later, Roland arrived. Cassandra had called him only after she had had time to process the seismic shift of becoming a mother, to simply be with her daughter in peace. He brought a bouquet of flowers and a soft stuffed animal, and an expression of wonder on his face that, for a fleeting moment, reminded her of why she had fallen in love with him in the first place. "She's beautiful," he said, looking at Zoe through the nursery window, a genuine awe in his voice. "She is," Cassandra agreed, her voice soft. "Can I hold her?" Cassandra's immediate instinct was to say no, to shield Zoe from the man who had caused so much pain. But she knew that wouldn't be fair to Zoe. Whatever her problems with Roland, he was still her daughter's father. "Yes," she conceded, "but just you. Jessica is not here." "She's at work," Roland confirmed, taking the baby from the nurse. Cassandra watched his face transform as he held his daughter for the first time, a mixture of trepidation and profound emotion washing over him. For a moment, she could almost forget about the affair, the lies, the betrayal. For a fragile, fleeting moment, they were just two people who had created something beautiful together. But the moment didn't last long. "I want her to have my last name," Roland stated, his voice firm, reasserting his claim. "She does," Cassandra replied calmly. "Zoe Donovan." "I want it to be official on the birth certificate," he insisted. Cassandra had already filled out the birth certificate, a deliberate, defiant act. Zoe's full name, Zoe Patricia Donovan. Patricia, for her lawyer, the fierce, brilliant woman who had fought so tirelessly for them, who had embodied strength and integrity. "It is official," Cassandra confirmed, her gaze unwavering. "What's her middle name?" Roland asked, a note of suspicion in his voice. "Patricia," Cassandra stated. Roland frowned, confusion giving way to anger. "Patricia? Like your lawyer?" "Cassandra, that's inappropriate. You're naming our daughter after the lawyer who's trying to keep me away from her. That's vindictive." "I'm naming our daughter after a woman who fought for what was right, Roland," Cassandra countered, her voice firm. "Patricia Stone is a strong, intelligent woman who helped me protect my child when you couldn't or wouldn't. I'm proud to have her name associated with my daughter." Roland handed Zoe back to Cassandra, his face tight with controlled fury. "We need to discuss this." "There's nothing to discuss," Cassandra replied, her voice resolute. "Her name is Zoe Patricia Donovan. My lawyer says—" "Your lawyer can say whatever he wants, Roland," Cassandra cut him off, a new, steely resolve in her voice. "I'm her mother, and I named her." It was their first fight as parents, a bitter skirmish over identity and control, and it set the tone for everything that would follow. They couldn't even agree on their daughter's name without it becoming a legal issue, a symbol of their fractured relationship. After Roland left, Cassandra looked down at Zoe, who was sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the tension that had permeated the room. "It's okay, baby girl," she whispered, stroking Zoe's soft hair. "Mommy's going to make sure you're safe and loved no matter what. I promise you that." Outside her hospital room, Cassandra could hear nurses talking about visiting hours and discharge procedures. Tomorrow, she would take Zoe home to her small apartment and begin the daunting, exhilarating process of being a single mother. It wasn't the life she had planned, but looking at her daughter's perfect, peaceful face, Cassandra felt something unexpected, something profound, happiness. Not the complicated, conditional happiness she had felt with Roland, tinged with anxiety and compromise, but something pure and uncomplicated. Love without lies, joy without betrayal, a future that belonged entirely to her and Zoe, built on a foundation of honesty and unwavering devotion. As Cassandra fell asleep that night, Zoe nestled safely in her arms. She made a solemn promise to her daughter. "You're going to grow up knowing you're loved, completely and unconditionally," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "And you're going to grow up knowing that love doesn't mean accepting less than you deserve. Ever." Life with a newborn was, as many new mothers discover, everything Cassandra had expected, and nothing she was truly prepared for. Zoe was a good baby, resilient and generally content, but she still woke up every 3 hours to eat, a relentless, primal rhythm that left Cassandra in a constant state of exhaustion. By the time Zoe was a month old, Cassandra felt like she was living in a fog of sleeplessness and baby formula, her days a blur of feedings, diaper changes, and fervent prayers for an hour of uninterrupted sleep. The supervised visits with Roland were scheduled for Saturday afternoons at a family center downtown. A social worker named Mrs. Chen, a kind but observant woman, watched while Roland held Zoe, attempting to navigate the unfamiliar territory of diaper changes and bottle warming. "He's not very natural with her," Mrs. Chen noted in her official report. A clinically accurate assessment that Cassandra didn't need to read to know was true. Roland seemed nervous around Zoe, holding her stiffly, as if afraid he might break her. He always looked visibly relieved when the 2-hour visit was finally over, handing her back to Cassandra with a sigh that bordered on exhalation. "Most new fathers need time to adjust," Patricia said, ever the pragmatist, when Cassandra expressed her concerns about Roland's awkwardness. "The important thing is that he's showing up. That's what the court wants to see." But Roland wasn't the only one showing up. Jessica had started appearing at the family center during the visits. She couldn't come into the supervised room because of the court order, but she waited conspicuously in the lobby. When Cassandra arrived to pick up Zoe, Jessica was always there, an unsettling fixture, a calculated presence. "How's my little stepdaughter?" Jessica would coo loudly enough for everyone in the lobby to hear, her voice saccharine sweet but with an edge of defiance. She wasn't Zoe's stepmother. She wasn't even legally married to Roland yet. But Jessica acted as if she had rights that she didn't actually possess, an audacious performance designed to provoke and intimidate. "She needs to stop calling herself Zoe's stepmother," Cassandra told Patricia, exasperated. "It's infuriating and confusing." "Technically, she can call herself whatever she wants," Patricia replied, a weary note in her voice. "It doesn't give her any legal standing, but yes, it is irritating and confusing for everyone involved." The social workers didn't know how to handle Jessica's persistent presence or her dramatic announcements. The other families at the center, quietly navigating their own complex visitation arrangements, would stare, their expressions a mixture of pity and discomfort. At Zoe's 2-month checkup, an unexpected and infuriating encounter occurred. Cassandra ran into Jessica at the pediatrician's office. "What are you doing here?" Cassandra demanded, her voice sharp with disbelief. "I had some questions about Zoe's development," Jessica replied, her tone insidiously reasonable. "I wanted to talk to her doctor." "You're not her parent," Cassandra stated, her frustration mounting. "Her doctor can't talk to you. You have no right to her medical information." "I'm going to be her stepmother," Jessica insisted. "I need to understand her medical needs. I'm trying to be responsible." Just then, Dr. Williams, Zoe's pediatrician, emerged from an exam room, witnessing the tense exchange. "Mrs. Donovan, is everything all right?" "Dr. Williams," Cassandra said, her voice strained. "This is Jessica Wright. She's not related to Zoe, but she's been trying to get information about my daughter's medical care." Dr. Williams looked at Jessica, her expression one of professional politeness, but with an underlying firmness. "I'm sorry, Miss Wright, but I can only discuss patient information with parents or legal guardians. Patient confidentiality is paramount." "I understand," Jessica said, her smile unwavering. "But I'm going to be part of Zoe's life, so I want to make sure I know how to take care of her properly. I need to be informed." "When you have legal standing to make medical decisions for Zoe," Dr. Williams responded, her voice leaving no room for argument, "then we can discuss her care. Until then, I can only speak with her mother and father." Jessica's smile remained fixed, but Cassandra could see the raw anger simmering beneath the surface, the barely concealed fury of a woman accustomed to getting her way. "Of course," Jessica simpered. "I just want what's best for Zoe." After Dr. Williams retreated back into his office, Jessica turned to Cassandra, her veneer of civility cracking. "You can't keep me away from her forever." "I can keep you away from her until the court says otherwise," Cassandra retorted, her voice hardening. "The court is going to change its mind," Jessica declared, a triumphant gleam in her eyes. "Roland's lawyer is filing for expanded visitation. He's making sure I have access." This was news to Cassandra. Patricia hadn't mentioned any new filings. "When?" "Soon, and when he gets overnight visits, I'll be there too, whether you like it or not." That afternoon, a wave of cold dread washing over her, Cassandra called Patricia. "Did Roland file for expanded visitation?" "Not yet," Patricia confirmed, "but I expect him to soon. It's been 2 months since the temporary order, and the supervised visits are going well, according to Mrs. Chen's reports. Roland is trying to show he's serious." "What if Jessica is right?" Cassandra asked, her voice tinged with fear. "What if the judge gives him overnight visits?" "Then we'll deal with it," Patricia said, her voice firm. "But Cassandra, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that Zoe will spend some nights at Roland's house. And if Jessica is living there, she'll inevitably be around." The thought made Cassandra sick to her stomach. Zoe was still so small, still nursing every few hours, completely dependent on her. The idea of her spending the night away from her mother, in an environment tainted by Jessica's presence, felt wrong in every possible way. "What if I'm still breastfeeding?" Cassandra asked, a desperate flicker of hope. "That might buy us some time," Patricia conceded. "Courts are usually reluctant to separate nursing babies from their mothers overnight, especially infants. It's a strong argument for continuity of care." A week later, Jessica called Cassandra directly again, bypassing the lawyers, a brazen act of calculated provocation. "We need to set up a meeting," Jessica stated, her voice imperious. "No, we don't," Cassandra replied, her patience wearing thin. "It's about Zoe's future. Roland and I are getting married next month, and we want to discuss co-parenting arrangements. We want to be reasonable." "I co-parent with Roland," Cassandra stated, her voice unwavering. "I don't co-parent with you. You have no legal standing." "Whether you like it or not, I'm going to be Zoe's stepmother," Jessica retorted, her voice hardening. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way. Your choice." "What's the easy way, Jessica?" Cassandra asked, a chilling curiosity overriding her frustration. "You acknowledge that I'm part of Zoe's family now. You stop trying to keep me away from her. You accept that Roland and I are building a life together that includes his daughter." "And the hard way?" Cassandra prompted, her gaze fixed on the phone. "We go back to court. Roland asks for expanded visitation and gets it. I become part of Zoe's life anyway, but without your cooperation, it will be messy and more difficult for everyone involved, for Zoe." Cassandra was quiet for a long moment, processing the ultimatum. "Jessica, can I ask you something?" "Sure," Jessica replied, a note of triumph in her voice. "Do you actually want to be a stepmother to a baby, or do you just want to win? Do you want to prove that you can take everything from me?" Jessica was quiet for an even longer moment, caught off guard. "I want to build a family with the man I love," she finally said, deflecting. "That's not what I asked," Cassandra pressed, sensing a flicker of vulnerability, a crack in Jessica's armor. "I think you're trying to keep Roland and me apart by using Zoe as a weapon," Jessica lashed out, regaining her composure, resorting to the familiar tactic of projecting her own malicious intent onto Cassandra. "I'm trying to protect my 3-month-old daughter from a confusing and unstable situation," Cassandra retorted, her voice firm. "Unstable?" Jessica scoffed. "Roland and I have been together for over a year. We own a house together. We're getting married. How is that unstable?" "You own my house together," Cassandra corrected, her voice dripping with scorn. "It's not your house anymore, Jessica. It's a symbol of a life you stole." The casualness with which Jessica spoke about taking over Cassandra's life, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, was breathtaking in its audacity. "I have to go," Cassandra said, ending the conversation. "Think about what I said," Jessica called after her, her voice sharp. "We can make this easy or we can make this hard. Your choice." That night, Cassandra called Linda, recounting the latest verbal assault. "She called me today. She wants to meet to discuss co-parenting arrangements." "Please tell me you said no," Linda pleaded. "I said no, but she threatened to go back to court. She's convinced Roland will get expanded visitation and she'll be around anyway." Linda was quiet for a moment, processing the relentless nature of Jessica's harassment. "Are you actually thinking about meeting with her, Cassandra?" "I don't know," Cassandra confessed, a desperate weariness in her voice. "Maybe if I talk to her, I can make her understand that Zoe needs stability, that a baby can't be a pawn in their games." "Cassandra, honey, that woman doesn't care about Zoe's stability," Linda said, her voice gentle but firm. She cares about winning. She wants to prove that she can take everything that was yours, including your daughter. You cannot negotiate with a shark. Linda was right, as she so often was. But Cassandra felt trapped, caught in a no-win situation. If she didn't meet with Jessica, Jessica would paint her as unreasonable and vindictive in court. If she did meet with Jessica, she would be legitimizing Jessica's role in Zoe's life, granting her an authority she hadn't earned. It was a vicious cycle of manipulation. The next Saturday at the family center, Cassandra watched Roland try, somewhat unsuccessfully, to get Zoe to take a bottle. Zoe was fussy, turning her head away from the artificial nipple. She was used to nursing, the comfort and intimacy of her mother's breast, and didn't like the cold, hard plastic. "She's not eating," Roland fretted to Mrs. Chen, looking flustered. "Some babies need time to adjust to bottles, Mr. Donovan," Mrs. Chen replied, her voice calm and reassuring. "It's normal. Don't force it. She'll eat when she's hungry." "But what if she doesn't eat anything during my visit?" Roland worried. "Then you'll try again next week," Mrs. Chen stated simply, her professionalism unwavering. Through the window, Cassandra could see Jessica pacing in the lobby. She was wearing a white dress, obviously expensive and utterly impractical for being around a baby. Her phone pressed to her ear, talking animatedly to someone, her frustration palpable even from a distance. After the visit, as Cassandra was packing up Zoe's diaper bag, Jessica approached, her expression a careful blend of concern and self-righteousness. "She didn't eat much during the visit," Jessica observed, her voice in accusation. "She's breastfeeding, Jessica," Cassandra replied, her voice flat. "Bottles are still new for her. We're working on it." "Maybe you should consider switching to formula," Jessica suggested, her tone almost casual. It would make visitation easier for Roland. Cassandra stared at her, speechless for a moment. "You want me to stop breastfeeding my 3-month-old daughter to make visitation easier for Roland and for you?" she asked, the incredulity evident in her voice. "I'm just saying it might be better for everyone," Jessica countered, unwavering. "Better for who?" Cassandra retorted, her anger flaring. "Certainly not better for Zoe. Better for Roland because he won't have to work so hard? Better for you because you won't have to worry about her eating during your visits?" The arrogance was breathtaking, the sheer audacity of suggesting Cassandra sacrifice her daughter's health and comfort for Jessica's convenience. "I'm not stopping breastfeeding because you think it would be easier," Cassandra stated, her voice firm with conviction. "Fine," Jessica snapped, her patience finally wearing thin. "But when Roland gets overnight visits, you're going to have to pump enough milk to last the whole weekend. And what if Zoe won't take bottles from him? What if she cries all night because she misses her mom and her comfort?" "Then maybe overnight visits aren't appropriate yet," Cassandra shot back, sensing an opening. Jessica stepped closer, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Or maybe you're being selfish, Cassandra. Maybe you're using breastfeeding as an excuse to keep Zoe away from her father, to punish Roland." "I'm using breastfeeding to feed my baby, Jessica," Cassandra retorted, her voice shaking with controlled rage. "That's literally what it's for. It's biological, it's natural, it's what's best for her." "Courts can order mothers to wean their babies if it interferes with custody arrangements," Jessica declared, her voice cold and confident, as if stating an indisputable legal fact. Cassandra had never heard of such a thing, but Jessica said it with such conviction, such legalistic precision, that it sounded plausible, terrifyingly real. "Is that a threat, Jessica?" "It's information," Jessica replied, her smile chilling. "Something you might want to consider before you make things even harder for yourself." As Cassandra drove home with Zoe sleeping peacefully in her car seat, she felt more defeated than she had since the divorce proceedings began. Jessica seemed to have an answer for everything, a legal strategy for every situation, every potential roadblock. And worst of all, some of what she said, from a cold, legalistic perspective, made a terrifying kind of sense, even if it was emotionally devastating. It wasn't about what was best for Zoe. It was about power, control, and winning. That night, Cassandra called Patricia, her voice trembling. "Can a court really order me to stop breastfeeding?" "Theoretically, in extreme circumstances," Patricia conceded, her voice calm and reassuring. "But those are very rare cases, usually where the mother is using breastfeeding to completely prevent a father from seeing his child, where it's clearly not in the child's best interest. That's not your situation, Cassandra. You're trying to facilitate visitation while still meeting your child's needs." "Jessica seems to think it is," Cassandra replied, her fear palpable. "Jessica isn't a lawyer, Cassandra," Patricia said, a hint of exasperation in her voice. "She's a woman who's watched too many legal dramas on TV and thinks she knows how this works. Her threats are baseless grandstanding. Don't let her intimidate you." But Patricia's reassurance, though logical, didn't entirely assuage Cassandra's fears. Jessica was smart, determined, and completely ruthless, and she had nothing to lose. If her relationship with Roland didn't work out, she could simply walk away and start over. But Cassandra couldn't walk away from being Zoe's mother. She was tied to this battle by an unbreakable bond of love and responsibility. As Cassandra finally fell asleep that night, Zoe nestled beside her. She wondered if she was fighting a battle she couldn't truly win, if the system itself was stacked against her. The morning of the final hearing dawned with a chilling, preternatural quiet. Cassandra woke at 5:00 a.m., her stomach a knot of nerves. Zoe was 4 months old now, sleeping better at night, but still nursing every few hours, a comforting routine that Cassandra clung to. Cassandra had barely slept, not because of the baby, but because of the momentous day that lay ahead. Patricia had prepared her as much as humanly possible, drilling her with practice questions and answers, meticulously reviewing all the evidence, developing intricate strategies for every conceivable scenario. But courtrooms were unpredictable, live arenas where emotions ran high and unexpected twists could derail even the most carefully laid plans. And Jessica's presence added a volatile wild card that made everything infinitely more complicated. "Remember, Cassandra," Patricia said, her voice firm, as they walked into the imposing courthouse, the scent of stale coffee and anxiety hanging in the air. "Stay calm, no matter what they say. Jessica is going to try everything to get under your skin, to provoke a reaction. Don't let her. Show the judge your strength, your composure, your unwavering focus on Zoe." The courtroom was more crowded than Cassandra had expected. Besides the lawyers and the primary parties, there were several people in the gallery, other lawyers waiting for their cases to be called, curious onlookers, and, in the front row, behind Roland's table, Jessica. She wore a severe navy blue dress that made her look professional, almost demure and serious. Her perfect blonde hair was pulled back into a conservative bun, her makeup minimal. She looked, Cassandra observed with a sickening realization, like someone's idea of the perfect stepmother. Poised, respectable, utterly disarming. Roland, by contrast, looked visibly nervous. He kept checking his phone, whispering frantically to Mr. Brighton. He had lost even more weight since Zoe was born, the stress of the divorce and the realities of new parenthood clearly taking their toll. He looked older, somehow, the carefree veneer of his earlier days completely stripped away. Judge Sanchez entered the courtroom, and everyone stood, a respectful hush falling over the room. He looked tired, like he had been grappling with contentious divorces all morning, and wasn't looking forward to another one. "Good morning," he said, settling into his high-backed chair, his gaze sweeping across the room, missing nothing. "This is the matter of Donovan versus Donovan, final hearing on divorce and custody. Are all parties ready to proceed?" Both lawyers indicated they were ready. "Mr. Brighton, you may call your first witness." "Thank you, Your Honor. I call Roland Donovan." Roland walked to the witness stand with visible nervousness, his shoulders hunched. He was sworn in, his voice a low mumble, and sat down, carefully avoiding eye contact with Cassandra. Mr. Brighton led him through basic questions: his job, his income, his current living situation. Roland answered in a clear, measured voice, meticulously painting a picture of a stable, responsible man, eager to be an active father. "Mr. Donovan, how often do you currently see your daughter?" Brighton asked, his tone solicitous. "Every Saturday for 2 hours," Roland replied, "supervised visits at the family center." "And how do you feel about that arrangement?" "It's not enough, Your Honor," Roland stated, his voice gaining a carefully rehearsed emotional resonance. "I want to be a real father to Zoe, not just a visitor. I want to be involved in her daily life, to nurture her, to teach her, to be there for her." "What kind of custody arrangement would you prefer, Mr. Donovan?" "I'd like shared custody, alternating weeks, or at least overnight visits on weekends," Roland said, looking earnestly at the judge. I believe that's in Zoe's best interest, to have both parents actively present in her life. And you feel capable of caring for a 4-month-old infant overnight independently? Brighton pressed, his voice confident. Yes, Roland asserted. I've learned a lot during the supervised visits. I can change diapers, give bottles, put her to sleep. I want to do the normal things that fathers do, the everyday routines of parenthood. Mr. Brighton nodded approvingly, the image of a committed, capable father beginning to coalesce. Tell the court about your current living situation. I live in the house that my wife and I bought together 5 years ago, Roland explained. It's a 4-bedroom house in a good neighborhood with excellent schools. It's a stable, loving environment for a child. Do you live alone, Mr. Donovan? No, I live with my fiancée, Jessica Wright. And how long have you and Ms. Wright been engaged? 6 months, Roland replied, a slight smile touching his lips. Do you plan to marry Ms. Wright? Yes, Your Honor, next month. Mr. Brighton was skillfully constructing a narrative of stability and commitment. 2 adults, deeply in love, planning a future together, ready to provide a loving 2-parent home for Zoe. Does Ms. Wright have experience with children, Mr. Donovan? Yes, Roland affirmed. She has a degree in early childhood education and worked in daycare centers for 3 years before her current job. She's wonderful with children. This was news to Cassandra, a calculated revelation designed to bolster Jessica's image. Jessica had experience with children. That would certainly look good to the judge. Mr. Donovan, how do you feel about your ex-wife's attitude toward your relationship with Ms. Wright? Brighton asked, leading him gently into the intended narrative. I think Cassandra is still very angry about the divorce, Roland stated, his voice tinged with feigned regret. And I believe she's taking that anger out on our daughter. She's trying to keep Zoe away from me as a way to punish me. Cassandra felt her face flush hot, a surge of indignant anger. But Patricia gently touched her arm, a silent warning to remain composed. Can you give the court an example, Mr. Donovan? She won't let Jessica meet Zoe, even though Jessica is going to be her stepmother, and would be a wonderful influence, Roland began, ticking off a list of grievances. She makes scheduling visits difficult, and she's still breastfeeding, even though Zoe is 4 months old, which makes overnight visits impossible, effectively holding Zoe hostage. What's unusual about breastfeeding a 4-month-old, Mr. Donovan? Judge Sanchez interjected, his voice surprisingly mild. Nothing, Your Honor, except that Cassandra refuses to supplement with formula, even when it would make visitation easier for Zoe to spend time with me overnight, Roland replied, his tone implying a deliberate act of sabotage. She knows that if Zoe won't take bottles from me, I can't have overnight visits. It feels like she's using it as a weapon. Mr. Brighton was making it sound like Cassandra was using breastfeeding, a natural act, as a manipulative tactic, an emotionally devastating accusation. Technically, it wasn't illegal, but it made her look calculating, vindictive. Thank you, Mr. Donovan. No further questions. Patricia stood up for cross-examination, her expression unreadable, but a palpable tension filled the air. Mr. Donovan, when did your romantic relationship with Ms. Wright begin? About a year ago, Roland replied, his voice a little less confident. And when did you tell your wife about this relationship? She found out about 6 months ago, he admitted, his gaze flickering to Cassandra, then away. So you were involved with Ms. Wright for approximately 6 months before your wife knew about it? Yes. During those 6 months, were you living with your wife? Yes. Sleeping in the same bed? Yes. Having marital relations? Roland looked profoundly uncomfortable, squirming on the stand. Sometimes. So you were intimate with your wife while simultaneously carrying on a secret, intimate relationship with another woman? Patricia pressed, her voice sharp and unforgiving. The marriage was already over, Roland mumbled defensively. I just hadn't told Cassandra yet. But Cassandra didn't know the marriage was over, did she? No. As far as she knew, you were happily married and trying to start a family, weren't you? We were trying to get pregnant, yes. And you continued trying to get pregnant with your wife, Patricia continued, her voice gaining power, while secretly planning to leave her for Ms. Wright, while building a new life with another woman? Mr. Brighton immediately stood. Objection! Argumentative, Your Honor! Judge Sanchez, however, overruled him. "Answer the question, Mr. Donovan." "I was confused about what I wanted," Roland said, his voice weak. "Confused enough to deliberately get your wife pregnant while planning to abandon her and your marriage?" Patricia challenged, her gaze unwavering. "The pregnancy wasn't planned," Roland insisted, desperately trying to salvage his image. "But you didn't stop trying to conceive when you started your relationship with Ms. Wright, did you?" No. Patricia was methodically, skillfully destroying Roland's credibility, brick by painful brick. Every answer made him look worse, painting a picture of deliberate deceit and profound disregard. "Mr. Donovan, you testified that you want shared custody of Zoe. How many times have you changed her diaper without supervision?" Roland stammered. "I don't know exactly. More than 10 times, I'm sure." "More than 5 times?" Patricia pressed, her voice gentle but insistent. "I'm not sure." "Probably not." "Have you ever given Zoe a bath by yourself, Mr. Donovan?" "No, she's still very small," he offered, a weak excuse. "Have you ever put her to sleep by yourself, without the social worker present?" "Not without the social worker there, no." "Have you ever taken care of her when she was sick, when she needed comfort and consistent care, Mr. Donovan?" "She hasn't been sick during my visits," he replied desperately. "So your entire experience caring for Zoe consists entirely of 2-hour supervised visits, where a trained social worker was present to help and guide you at all times, to literally do the hands-on work?" Patricia concluded, her voice laden with irony. "Yes," Roland admitted, defeated. "But I'm learning. I'm trying." "And you feel ready to care for her overnight, completely independently, based on this limited experience, based on what amounts to a weekly lesson with a professional?" Patricia asked, a rhetorical question. "I think I could figure it out," Roland offered, his voice barely audible. Patricia looked at the judge, a silent plea in her eyes. "Mr. Donovan thinks he could figure out how to care for a 4-month-old infant overnight, Your Honor. No further questions." Roland looked utterly defeated as he returned to his seat. His lawyer had tried to present him as a committed, capable father, but Patricia had exposed him as an inexperienced, unprepared parent clearly in over his head. The stark reality was that he had prioritized his affair over learning the basic skills of fatherhood. "Mr. Brighton, call your next witness," Judge Sanchez instructed, his gaze now turning to the gallery. "I call Jessica Wright," Brighton announced, a hopeful note in his voice. Cassandra's stomach dropped, a cold, hard knot forming in her gut. She had known this was coming, but seeing Jessica walk confidently to the witness stand, her head held high, a slight, knowing smile on her lips, was still a shock. Jessica was sworn in, her voice clear and strong, and sat down with perfect, almost artificial posture. She looked directly at Mr. Brighton, her smile widening slightly, as if she were looking forward to this performance. She was here to impress, to captivate. "Ms. Wright, please tell the court about your educational background," Brighton began, allowing her to establish her credentials. "I have a bachelor's degree in early childhood education from State University and a master's degree in educational psychology," Jessica recited, her voice poised. "And your work experience, Ms. Wright?" "I worked in daycare centers for 3 years after college," she explained, "then moved into corporate training and development. I currently work as a training coordinator for a large company. Do you have experience caring for infants, Ms. Wright?" "Yes, extensive experience. I've cared for children from 6 weeks old to 5 years old. I love children and have always been passionate about early childhood development." Jessica was meticulously presenting herself as the perfect stepmother, educated, experienced, and brimming with enthusiasm, a stark contrast to Roland's admitted inexperience. "Ms. Wright, how would you describe your relationship with Mr. Donovan?" "We're very much in love, Your Honor," Jessica gushed, looking at Roland, who offered a weak smile. "We're getting married next month and planning to build a family together, a happy, stable home." "How do you feel about becoming a stepmother to Zoe?" "I'm incredibly excited about it," Jessica declared, her voice radiating warmth and sincerity. "I love children, and I think I can provide a stable, loving home environment for her, a place where she can thrive and grow." "Have you had any contact with Zoe, Ms. Wright?" "Unfortunately, no, Your Honor. Mrs. Donovan has refused to allow me to meet her, even though I'm going to be her stepmother and only want to establish a positive relationship." "How does that make you feel, Ms. Wright?" Brighton asked, prompting her for a sympathetic response. "Frustrated, Your Honor. I understand that divorce is difficult, but I think Mrs. Donovan is putting her own feelings, her own anger, ahead of what's best for Zoe, for what's best for the child." Jessica was a master of manipulation, skillfully crafting an image of reasonableness and concern, positioning herself as the wronged party, the victim of Cassandra's vindictiveness. "Ms. Wright, have you observed Mrs. Donovan's behavior toward you and Mr. Donovan?" "Yes, Your Honor. She's been very hostile and vindictive. She seems determined to punish us for falling in love, for finding happiness." "Can you give the court an example?" "She's refused to consider formula feeding, even though it would make visitation easier for everyone," Jessica offered, repeating Roland's earlier accusation. "She's made scheduling visits difficult. She's told people in the community that I'm trying to steal her child, which is a cruel and baseless accusation." "Have you ever tried to steal Mrs. Donovan's child, Ms. Wright?" Brighton asked, a note of outrage in his voice. "Of course not," Jessica scoffed, feigning offense. "I just want to be part of Zoe's life in an appropriate, supportive way, as her stepmother." Brighton nodded, satisfied. "Thank you, Ms. Wright. No further questions." Patricia stood up, a look on her face that made Cassandra's blood run cold. She had seen that look before, usually right before Patricia systematically demolished someone's credibility, exposing their lies for all to see. It was a look of controlled, surgical precision. "Ms. Wright," Patricia began, her voice deceptively gentle, "when did you first meet Mr. Donovan?" "About 18 months ago," Jessica replied, her composure unwavering. "Where did you meet?" "At a work conference." "And when did your romantic relationship begin, Ms. Wright?" "About a year ago." "At that time, did you know Mr. Donovan was married?" Patricia asked, her voice calm, a loaded question. Jessica hesitated for just a moment, a barely perceptible flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. "Yes," she admitted, her voice softer now. "Did you know his wife, Mrs. Donovan, was actively trying to get pregnant?" "I knew they were married," Jessica said, trying to evade. "I didn't know the details of their personal life." "But you began a sexual relationship with a married man whose wife didn't know about you," Patricia stated. Not a question, but a stark declaration of fact. "The marriage was already in trouble," Jessica asserted, clinging to Roland's pathetic excuse. "Roland told me they were planning to separate." "When did he tell you that, Ms. Wright?" Patricia pressed, her voice still calm, but with an underlying steel. "Early in our relationship, so approximately 11 months ago." "Yes, Ms. Wright," Patricia said, her voice now cold and precise. "I'm going to show you some text messages that were turned over during discovery, messages between you and Mr. Donovan." Patricia handed Jessica a stack of papers. Jessica's confident expression faltered slightly as she looked at them, her eyes scanning the damning evidence. "These are messages from 10 months ago. Could you read the highlighted portion for the court?" Jessica looked at the paper reluctantly, her voice barely a whisper. I don't think this is relevant, Your Honor." "These are messages that were submitted as evidence, Ms. Wright," Judge Sanchez interjected, his voice firm. "The witness should answer. Please read the highlighted portion." Jessica's voice was quieter now, stripped of its earlier bravado. "It says, 'When are you going to tell your wife about us? I'm tired of hiding.' So 10 months ago, Ms. Wright, you were asking Mr. Donovan when he was going to tell his wife about your relationship, correct?" "Yes." "Which means his wife, Mrs. Donovan, did not know about you at that time, did she?" "No, she didn't." "Ms. Wright, you just testified that Mr. Donovan told you he and his wife were planning to separate early in your relationship, approximately 11 months ago. When exactly did he tell you that?" Jessica was trapped. If she said before, it would directly contradict the timeline of her own texts. If she said after, it would prove she knowingly participated in the deception. "I don't remember exactly," she stammered, her face paling. "Let me help you remember, Ms. Wright," Patricia said, her voice like ice. "Could you read the next highlighted message for the court?" Jessica looked down at the paper, her hands trembling slightly. "It says, 'I can't wait until we don't have to sneak around anymore.' When did you send that message, Ms. Wright?" I don't remember. According to the metadata, Patricia stated, her voice devoid of emotion, you sent that message 9 months ago. So 9 months ago, Ms. Wright, you were still sneaking around, and Mr. Donovan still hadn't told his wife about you, is that correct? I guess so, Jessica whispered, her confidence rapidly evaporating. But you testified that he told you they were planning to separate early in your relationship, which would have been 11 months ago. If they were planning to separate, Ms. Wright, why were you still sneaking around 9 months ago? Why were you still desperate for him to tell his wife if she was already aware of the impending separation? Jessica was visibly uncomfortable, squirming on the stand, her lies unraveling before her. Maybe he just needed more time to figure out how to tell her, she offered weakly. Or maybe, Ms. Wright, Patricia countered, her voice now sharp and accusatory, he never told you they were planning to separate. Maybe you knew, explicitly and unequivocally, that you were participating in adultery, in a deliberate deception against a married woman, and you didn't care. Maybe you were an active, willing participant in his lies. "Objection!" Mr. Brighton shouted, jumping to his feet. "Argumentative!" "Sustained," Judge Sanchez said, but the damage was done. The implication hung heavy in the air, undeniable. Patricia continued, pressing her advantage. "Ms. Wright, are you familiar with the prenatal vitamins that Mrs. Donovan was taking during her pregnancy?" "I don't know anything about that," Jessica insisted, trying to rebuild her crumbling facade of ignorance. "Have you ever been in the Donovan house, Ms. Wright?" "Yes." "How many times?" "I don't know exactly. More than 10 times, certainly. Probably more than 20 times, maybe. And during those visits, Ms. Wright, did you ever see prenatal vitamins in the bathroom or the kitchen? Small bottles of vitamins clearly labeled prenatal?" Jessica realized where this line of questioning was going, a dawning horror in her eyes. I might have." "So, you knew Mrs. Donovan was pregnant before she even found out about your relationship with her husband, didn't you?" Patricia stated, a chilling truth. "I saw some pills, but I didn't know what they were for," Jessica insisted, a desperate lie. "Ms. Wright, you have a bachelor's degree in early childhood education and a master's degree in educational psychology," Patricia reminded her, her voice dripping with irony. "Are you telling this court that you, a highly educated woman with extensive knowledge of women's health and early childhood development, could not identify prenatal vitamins? Are you asking this court to believe that you were so utterly oblivious?" Jessica was quiet for a long, agonizing moment, completely exposed. I might have suspected she was pregnant," she finally admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "And you continued your relationship with her husband anyway?" Patricia pressed, the full weight of Jessica's depravity hanging in the air. "I loved him," Jessica cried out, a pathetic, desperate plea for understanding. "You loved him enough to help him deceive his pregnant wife?" Patricia retorted, unforgiving. "I wasn't trying to hurt anyone," Jessica whimpered. "But you knew you were hurting someone, didn't you, Ms. Wright?" Patricia's voice was a steel trap. "You knew that Mrs. Donovan was pregnant, carrying his child, planning a future with the man you were sleeping with, and you chose to continue your deception. You understood the emotional devastation you were causing." "I thought he would leave her," Jessica confessed, her voice thick with self-pity. "When, Ms. Wright?" Patricia hammered, relentless. "When did you think he would leave his pregnant wife? Before the baby was born, while she was carrying his child, or after? What was the plan?" "After the baby was born," Jessica blurted out, the words echoing through the suddenly silent courtroom. The courtroom was completely still, the air thick with the unspoken horror of her admission. Jessica had just casually admitted that she expected Roland to abandon his pregnant wife and newborn child, leaving Cassandra to cope with the immense physical and emotional demands of single motherhood, while she and Roland rode off into the sunset. It was a cold, calculated plan, utterly devoid of empathy. "So, your plan, Ms. Wright," Patricia said, her voice dangerously quiet, "was for Mr. Donovan to stay with his wife through her entire pregnancy and birth, pretending to be a loving husband and father-to-be, and then abandon her with a newborn baby. Is that what you just testified to?" That is what you just testified, isn't it?" Patricia continued, cutting through Jessica's stammering. "That you thought he would leave her after the baby was born?" Jessica looked at Roland desperately, her eyes pleading for help, but he was staring at the table, utterly defeated, unable to meet her gaze. "I wasn't thinking about it like that," she whimpered. "How were you thinking about it, Ms. Wright?" Patricia demanded, her voice rising now, exposing the full extent of Jessica's callousness. "Tell this court how you were thinking about orchestrating the abandonment of a pregnant woman and a newborn child." "I just wanted to be with the man I loved, even if it meant destroying his family," Jessica cried, finally breaking down in a torrent of ugly, self-serving tears. "Objection!" Mr. Brighton interjected, appalled by his own witness's outburst. "Withdrawn," Patricia said, her job done. "No further questions." Jessica returned to her seat, looking utterly shaken, her carefully constructed facade completely shattered. The confident, poised woman who had taken the stand moments ago was gone, replaced by someone who looked young, foolish, and cruelly exposed. Her raw, selfish admission had painted a damning portrait of her character, a stark contrast to the reasonable, loving stepmother she had attempted to portray. Judge Sanchez called for a brief recess, and Cassandra finally felt like she could breathe again. The air in the courtroom, once thick with tension, now felt lighter, cleared by the sudden gust of truth. "How did I do?" Patricia asked, a rare small smile gracing her lips. "You destroyed her," Cassandra whispered, still reeling from the dramatic turn. "She destroyed herself," Patricia corrected, her eyes twinkling. "I just gave her enough rope. Her own arrogance and lack of empathy were her undoing. She couldn't resist the urge to appear superior, to revel in her perceived victory, even if it meant revealing her true colors under oath." But as they waited for the hearing to resume, Cassandra couldn't shake the feeling that something else, something potentially catastrophic, was still lurking, waiting to go very wrong. Her gut told her that Judge Sanchez's calm demeanor hid a storm, that Jessica's unraveling was just the beginning. When court resumed, Judge Sanchez looked different, more focused, more alert, his gaze piercing. Jessica's shocking testimony had clearly caught his attention, igniting a sense of judicial indignation that the earlier, more predictable proceedings had not. "Miss Stone, call your next witness," he instructed, his voice ringing with renewed authority. "I call Cassandra Donovan," Patricia announced, her voice a beacon of support. Cassandra walked to the witness stand on shaking legs, a mixture of dread and grim determination in her heart. She had been dreading this moment for months, the thought of being cross-examined by Mr. Brighton while Jessica watched from the gallery, feeling like walking into a carefully laid trap. But she had to do this for Zoe. Patricia led her through the basic questions: her job as a high school English teacher, her income, her living situation, her meticulous care of Zoe during the first 4 months of her baby's life. She presented Cassandra not as a victim, but as a capable, loving, and dedicated mother. "Mrs. Donovan, why are you opposed to overnight visitation for your ex-husband at this time?" Patricia asked, setting the stage. "Zoe is still very young, Your Honor," Cassandra explained, her voice clear and steady. "She's exclusively breastfeeding, and she's never spent a night away from me. I believe it would be traumatic for her, disrupt her sense of security and attachment. Are you opposed to Mr. Donovan having a relationship with his daughter?" "No, Your Honor. I want him to have a relationship with Zoe, a positive and healthy one. But I want that relationship to develop naturally, gradually, as she gets older and is better able to cope with separations and new environments." "How do you feel about Ms. Wright's involvement in your daughter's life at this stage?" Patricia continued, her gaze direct. Cassandra looked at Jessica, who was sitting forward in her seat, her eyes fixed on Cassandra, like she was watching her favorite television show. "I think Zoe is too young to be introduced to her father's girlfriend, especially given the circumstances of their relationship and the divorce," Cassandra replied, her voice unwavering. "She needs stability and consistency, a clear understanding of who her parents are without external confusion. Introducing a new partner, particularly one who was an active participant in the breakdown of our marriage, is premature and potentially damaging to her emotional well-being." "What concerns you about Ms. Wright specifically?" "She participated in adultery during my pregnancy," Cassandra stated, her voice firm. "She helped my husband deceive me while I was carrying his child. She openly admitted under oath that she expected him to leave me after Zoe was born. I don't believe she has good judgment when it comes to what's best for children, or how to foster a truly stable environment built on trust. Thank you, Mrs. Donovan. No further questions. Mr. Brighton approached, a stack of papers in his hand and a smile that made Cassandra nervous. He was a master of insinuation, of twisting words and intentions. Mrs. Donovan, isn't it true that you're using breastfeeding as a way to prevent your ex-husband from having overnight visits, as a means of control? No, Mr. Brighton, Cassandra replied, her voice firm. I'm breastfeeding because it's what's best for my daughter's health and development, as recommended by medical professionals. It's a fundamental aspect of her care. But you refuse to supplement with formula, even though it would make visitation easier for her father? Zoe is 4 months old, Mr. Brighton, Cassandra calmly explained. Breast milk is the best nutrition for her. It provides antibodies and fosters a unique bond. While formula can be an alternative, it's not the same, and I prioritize my daughter's health above convenience. Mrs. Donovan, are you familiar with the American Academy of Pediatrics guidelines on breastfeeding? Brighton pressed, trying to corner her. Cassandra wasn't sure where this was going, but she knew her facts. Yes, I am. And those guidelines say that babies can be successfully weaned to formula at any point, correct? They can be, Mr. Brighton, Cassandra conceded, but that doesn't mean they should be, or that it's always in the child's best interest to do so. It's a personal decision, made in consultation with my pediatrician, based on Zoe's needs. So it's your choice to continue breastfeeding, Mrs. Donovan, not a medical necessity required by Zoe's health, Brighton concluded, twisting her words. It's what I believe is best for my daughter, Cassandra reiterated, her voice unwavering. Mr. Brighton switched tactics, moving to a more insidious attack. Mrs. Donovan, isn't it true that you've told other people that you hope Mr. Donovan will lose interest in Zoe if visitation is difficult enough? Cassandra's blood ran cold. She had never said that, not in those words. It was a vicious misrepresentation. No, Mr. Brighton, that's not true. I would never wish for my daughter's father to lose interest in her. That's a cruel and false accusation. You never expressed the hope that your ex-husband would give up and go away if he found fatherhood too challenging? No. Mr. Brighton showed her a piece of paper. This is a sworn statement from your neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. She says, and I quote, "You told her, maybe if visitation is hard enough, Roland will just give up and focus on his new life." Cassandra stared at the paper, the words a hammer blow. She remembered the conversation with Mrs. Patterson, a casual chat in the grocery store. But it hadn't been like that. Mrs. Patterson had asked if she thought Roland, given his prior disinterest, would really want to deal with a crying baby every weekend, and Cassandra had simply said, maybe he'll decide it's too much work. It was a reflection on Roland's character, not a hope for Zoe's abandonment. That's taken out of context, Cassandra stated, her voice trembling with indignation. So you did say it, Brighton pressed, relentless. I said that some fathers lose interest when parenting gets difficult, Mr. Brighton. I didn't say I hoped he would. It was an observation, not a desire. But you did think he might give up if visitation was challenging, didn't you? I thought he might realize that being a father is harder than he expected, Cassandra replied, refusing to be gaslighted. Mr. Brighton was skillfully making her sound calculating and manipulative, twisting her perfectly reasonable observations into vindictive machinations designed to drive Roland away. Mrs. Donovan, how do you feel about your ex-husband's relationship with Ms. Wright? I think they're both selfish people who put their own wants ahead of everyone else's needs, particularly a vulnerable infant's needs, Cassandra replied, her voice firm. Are you angry with them? Yes, Mr. Brighton, I am angry, Cassandra stated, refusing to deny a legitimate emotion. Anyone in my position would be. Angry enough to use your daughter as a weapon against them? No, Cassandra retorted, her voice sharp with conviction. I would never use my daughter as a weapon. She is my world, not a tool for revenge. My actions are solely for her protection and well-being. But you admit you're angry? Of course I'm angry, Cassandra exclaimed, her voice rising now, raw with emotion. My husband cheated on me while I was pregnant. He moved his mistress into our house. He stole marital funds. He's planning to marry her while our divorce isn't even final yet. Anyone would be angry. It's a natural, healthy response to profound betrayal. And that anger, Mrs. Donovan, influences your decisions about custody, doesn't it? Brighton probed, trying to connect her anger to her judgment. My decisions about custody are based on what's best for Zoe, Mr. Brighton, Cassandra declared, her voice ringing with clarity. Not on my desire to punish my ex-husband. They are based on providing her with stability, security, and a loving, honest environment. His actions, and Ms. Wright's, however, have demonstrably proven that they are incapable of providing that at this crucial stage. Mr. Brighton was skilled at making reasonable anger sound like vindictive manipulation, and every answer Cassandra gave, however honest, seemed to be twisted to support his narrative of an unstable, vengeful woman. Mrs. Donovan, you named your daughter after your divorce lawyer. Don't you think that shows a certain level of vindictiveness, an attempt to permanently brand your child with the acrimony of this divorce? Brighton asked, his voice dripping with condescension. Cassandra looked at Patricia, who nodded slightly, a silent encouragement to speak her truth. I named my daughter after a woman who fought for what was right, Mr. Brighton, Cassandra said, her voice strong and clear, reclaiming her narrative. Patricia Stone is a strong, intelligent woman who helped me protect my child when I was at my most vulnerable. She embodies integrity and courage. I'm proud to have her name associated with my daughter. It's a tribute to strength, not vindictiveness. You're proud to have your daughter named after the person who's trying to keep her away from her father? Brighton scoffed. I'm proud to have my daughter named after someone who puts children's needs first, who stands up for justice, and who inspires me to be a stronger mother, Cassandra retorted, her gaze unwavering. Mr. Brighton switched tactics again, probing at her emotional state. Mrs. Donovan, have you ever been treated for depression or anxiety related to this divorce? No, Cassandra replied. Have you ever seen a therapist or counselor for the emotional distress you've clearly experienced? Not since college, Mr. Brighton. I have a strong support system. My family, my friends, my colleagues. But no professional mental health support for dealing with such a profound betrayal and the immense challenges of becoming a single mother? I don't need professional mental health support for recognizing and fighting against blatant injustice, Mr. Brighton. My strength comes from within and from the love I have for my daughter. Mrs. Donovan, Brighton concluded, his voice laced with patronizing concern. Don't you think it would be beneficial for Zoe to have two parents who are happily partnered, who project an image of familial harmony, rather than one angry single mother perpetually embroiled in conflict? Patricia stood up instantly. Objection. Argumentative, Your Honor, and highly inappropriate. Sustained, Judge Sanchez said, a sharp note in his voice, but the question had been asked, and Cassandra, with Patricia's silent encouragement, chose to answer it. I think it would be beneficial for Zoe to have parents who respect each other and put her needs first, Mr. Brighton, Cassandra replied, her voice clear and resolute. I don't think she benefits from being around people who lie and cheat, who break their promises, and who use their child as a pawn in their personal dramas. Honesty and integrity are far more beneficial than a manufactured image of happy partnership built on deceit. Thank you, Mrs. Donovan. No further questions. As Cassandra returned to her seat, she felt like she had been put through a blender. Every word she had uttered, every emotion she had displayed, twisted to fit Brighton's narrative of her instability and vindictiveness. It was a profoundly unsettling experience, but she had held her ground. Patricia offered a small, reassuring smile. Just a few questions, Your Honor, she said, approaching Cassandra with a gentle expression, a stark contrast to Brighton's aggressive demeanor. Mrs. Donovan, you testified that you're angry about your husband's affair and his actions. Is that anger directed at your daughter, Zoe? No, Your Honor. Absolutely not, Cassandra affirmed, her voice filled with tenderness. My daughter is the best thing that's ever happened to me. I love her completely. My anger is directed at the betrayal, at the lies, at the profound disrespect shown to me and to our marriage. It has nothing to do with my love for Zoe. Does your anger affect how you care for Zoe, Mrs. Donovan? No, Your Honor. If anything, it makes me more determined to give her the best life possible, to protect her, to raise her in a home filled with honesty and unwavering love. My resolve has only strengthened. When you make decisions about custody and visitation for Zoe, Mrs. Donovan, what is the primary consideration in your mind? What's best for Zoe, Your Honor, Cassandra stated, her voice unwavering, cutting through all the legal jargon and emotional manipulation. Not what's easiest for me, not what makes me feel better, not what gives me any form of revenge. It's always, always what helps her grow up healthy, secure, and loved. Her well-being is my absolute priority. Thank you, Mrs. Donovan. No further questions. Judge Sanchez looked at his notes for a long, quiet moment, the courtroom completely silent, except for the soft rustle of papers and the collective breathing of those present. The tension was almost unbearable. Cassandra's heart pounded against her ribs. She had expected him to take the case under advisement, to deliberate for days or even weeks. She wasn't ready for an immediate decision. "I'm ready to make my ruling," Judge Sanchez stated, his voice cutting through the silence, each word deliberate and measured. Cassandra's breath caught in her throat. This has been a difficult case because it involves a very young child and parents who clearly have strong, deeply personal feelings about each other. However, my primary concern, indeed my sole concern, is the welfare of the minor child, Zoe Patricia Donovan. Judge Sanchez looked directly at Roland, his gaze piercing. "Mr. Donovan, I appreciate your stated desire to be an active father. However, your testimony today has convinced me that you are not ready for overnight visitation with a 4-month-old infant. Your experience is limited, your understanding of a newborn's needs appears superficial, and your priorities, particularly your focus on your new relationship over the practicalities of infant care, seem unclear and misaligned with your child's best interests." Roland looked utterly shocked, his face crumbling. "I am going to continue the current arrangement of supervised visitation for another 3 months. At that time, we can revisit the possibility of extended visitation, provided you can demonstrate a significantly enhanced capacity for independent, unsupervised infant care and a stable, child-focused environment." Cassandra felt a powerful wave of relief wash over her, a lightness she hadn't experienced in months. Zoe would be protected. However, Judge Sanchez continued, his voice hardening, turning his attention to Jessica, who had been smiling triumphantly since he began speaking, clearly expecting her testimony to have swayed him in her favor. "I want to address something else that came up during today's testimony, something that gives this court grave concern. Miss Wright," he said, his gaze fixed on her, "I need to ask you a direct question." Jessica sat up straighter, adjusting her posture, clearly expecting praise for her carefully crafted performance. "During your cross-examination, you testified about your knowledge of marital assets and financial arrangements between Mr. and Mrs. Donovan. You seemed very familiar with their financial situation for someone who was not married to either of them. Your insights into their accounts were remarkably detailed." "Right. Have you had direct access to bank accounts or financial records belonging to the Donovans?" The question hung in the air like a bomb about to explode, the full weight of its implications slowly dawning on Jessica. She looked at Mr. Brighton, who was frantically shuffling through papers, visibly panicking. I might have seen some documents," Jessica stammered, her voice thin. "What kind of documents, Ms. Wright?" Judge Sanchez pressed, relentless. "Bank statements, credit card bills, things like that." "And how did you come to see these documents, Ms. Wright? Did Mrs. Donovan give you permission to review her private financial records?" "Roland showed them to me," Jessica admitted, her voice barely audible. "Why did Mr. Donovan show you his marital financial records, records that belonged equally to his wife, Ms. Wright?" Jessica was starting to look genuinely panicked, her composed facade completely gone. "We were planning our future together. He wanted me to understand the financial situation, his assets. Ms. Wright," Judge Sanchez continued, his voice now chillingly calm, "did you help Mr. Donovan move money from accounts that included Mrs. Donovan's name? Did you assist him in transferring marital funds without Mrs. Donovan's knowledge or consent?" The courtroom was dead silent. Even the court reporter had stopped typing, sensing the momentous shift. "Wait!" Roland suddenly interjected, his voice desperate. "He had a right to the money. It was ours. Mr. Donovan, your input is irrelevant at this moment," Judge Sanchez boomed, silencing him. "Ms. Wright, that's not what I asked. Did you help him move money?" Yes, Jessica whispered, completely defeated. Did you know that Mrs. Donovan didn't know about these transfers? Did you know you were participating in a clandestine financial transaction designed to conceal funds from the legitimate co-owner of those accounts? Jessica looked at Roland desperately, tears welling in her eyes, but Roland could offer no help. Roland said it was okay, she whimpered. Ms. Wright, what Mr. Donovan said is irrelevant, Judge Sanchez declared, his voice filled with judicial fury. The money belonged to both spouses, using it to buy gifts for your mistress, to build a life with another woman, without the other spouse's knowledge or consent, without any legal dissolution of assets, is fraud. It is theft. It is a criminal act. Ms. Wright, did you personally benefit from money that was taken from joint marital accounts? I don't understand, Jessica stammered, trying to evade. Did Mr. Donovan buy you expensive things, Ms. Wright, with money from accounts that belonged to both him and his wife? Did he use stolen marital funds to shower you with gifts? Jessica was trapped, completely exposed, and she knew it. Maybe, she whimpered. Maybe. Ms. Wright, let me ask you this, very simply, unequivocally. Did Mr. Donovan buy your engagement ring with money directly from a joint account that belonged to both him and Mrs. Donovan? Jessica looked like she was going to be violently sick, her face ashen, all pretense of composure shattered. Yes, she choked out. The courtroom erupted in a flurry of whispers and gasps. Mr. Brighton was on his feet, objecting frantically, but his voice was drowned out. Patricia, for her part, was struggling to contain a triumphant smile, her eyes sparkling with fierce satisfaction. Cassandra felt like she couldn't breathe, a mixture of shock, validation, and profound relief washing over her. "Order!" Judge Sanchez boomed, banging his gavel forcefully. When the room was quiet again, Judge Sanchez leaned forward, his expression stern, his gaze fixed on Jessica. "Ms. Wright, are you aware that knowingly participating in the fraudulent transfer of marital assets and then lying about your knowledge of Mrs. Donovan's pregnancy and your complicity in the deception under oath is a crime? Are you aware that this constitutes perjury and potentially accessory to fraud?" "I didn't know it was fraudulent," Jessica wailed, tears streaming down her face, not the delicate, calculated tears designed to garner sympathy, but the ugly, desperate sobs of someone who had just realized she was in very, very serious trouble. "But you knew Mrs. Donovan didn't know about it, didn't you, Ms. Wright? You knew the money was being hidden from her. You knew you were receiving gifts purchased with funds that were not solely Mr. Donovan's to give." "Yes," she sobbed. "And you accepted expensive gifts that were purchased with stolen money. That's a knowing benefit from fraud, Ms. Wright, and your testimony today was, at best, a calculated attempt to mislead this court, and at worst, outright perjury." "It wasn't stolen," Roland protested again, weakly. "Mr. Donovan, what you say is irrelevant at this point." Judge Sanchez cut him off, his voice cold. "The money belonged to both spouses. Using it to buy gifts for your mistress without the other spouse's knowledge or consent, particularly in the context of a divorce proceeding, is fraud, plain and simple." Jessica was now a weeping, incoherent mess. "Your Honor," Mr. Brighton stammered, his face white, "my client was not aware of the criminal implications." "Mr. Brighton," Judge Sanchez said, his voice laced with judicial fury, "I suggest you advise your client, Mr. Donovan, to seek independent counsel immediately regarding potential criminal charges. And I suggest you advise yourself to do the same, as your representation of a client potentially involved in such activities raises significant ethical questions. As for Ms. Wright, I suggest you advise her to seek independent counsel immediately regarding potential charges of perjury and accessory to fraud." Judge Sanchez then turned back to Jessica, his eyes blazing. "Ms. Wright, you are no longer welcome in my courtroom. If you attend any future hearings in this matter, in any capacity, I will have you arrested for contempt, and I will ensure you face the full legal consequences of your actions." Jessica stumbled out of the courtroom, still crying, a pathetic, ignominious exit. Roland looked like he had been hit by a truck, his face pale and utterly defeated, his carefully constructed life now in ruins. "Mr. Donovan," Judge Sanchez continued, his voice grim, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation of fraud and perjury. You lied under oath about your financial dealings, and you stole from your wife to support your mistress. Your actions demonstrate a profound lack of integrity, a willingness to deceive and manipulate, and a clear disregard for your legal and ethical obligations. Judge Sanchez looked at his notes one more time, his gaze firm and resolute. As for custody, I'm awarding full physical custody to Mrs. Donovan. Mr. Donovan will have supervised visitation, 2 hours per week, at the family center, until further order of this court. Given his dishonesty, his criminal behavior, and the evidence of his general instability and lack of commitment to the practicalities of fatherhood, I cannot trust him with overnight visitation at this time, nor can I allow him to jeopardize the emotional and financial stability of his child. This court cannot and will not reward such egregious conduct. Cassandra couldn't believe what she was hearing. Full physical custody. Jessica banned from the courtroom, facing criminal charges. Roland facing criminal charges, his carefully built career in ruins, his access to Zoe severely limited. It was a complete, unequivocal vindication. "This court is adjourned," Judge Sanchez announced, his gavel striking the bench with a final, resonant thud. As people filed out of the courtroom, a whirlwind of whispers and shocked expressions, Cassandra sat in her chair, trying to process the seismic shift that had just occurred. 6 months of fear and uncertainty, of relentless emotional warfare and legal battles, had ended in a triumph far greater than she could have ever imagined. Patricia put her hand on Cassandra's shoulder, her eyes shining with pride. "It's over, Cassandra," she said, her voice gentle. "You won. You fought, and you won." But looking at Roland's devastated face as he was led away by his bewildered lawyer, his dreams in tatters, Cassandra didn't feel like she had won anything in the traditional sense. She had simply protected her daughter, and that, she realized, was all that had ever truly mattered. Justice had been served, not as revenge, but as a restoration of balance, a reassertion of truth in a world turned upside down by lies. 6 months later, the scent of fresh coffee filled the sun-drenched kitchen of Cassandra's new house. She stood by the window, watching 10-month-old Zoe toddle with wobbly steps between the couch and the coffee table, her tiny hands reaching for colorful blocks scattered across the floor. The house wasn't large, but it was perfect. 3 bedrooms, a fenced yard for Zoe to play in, enough space for them to grow, to build a future unmarred by the shadows of the past. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of legal finalizations, moving logistics, and the joyful, exhausting demands of life as a single mother. Roland had indeed been charged with fraud and perjury, Jessica as an accessory. Both, facing the full weight of the law, had pleaded guilty to reduced charges, receiving probation and community service, a consequence that, while not prison, utterly destroyed their respective careers. Roland's accounting practice, built on a foundation of trust, crumbled under the scandal. Jessica's aspirations in corporate training, her image as a respectable professional, dissolved overnight. The civil case had been settled swiftly once the criminal charges were filed. Cassandra had received the house, the vast majority of the retirement accounts, and a substantial sum of money that provided financial security for herself and Zoe, ensuring her daughter would never want for anything. Roland's visitation rights had been further reduced to a mere hour per week, still supervised, at the family center, a stark reflection of his diminished role and the court's complete loss of trust. "Mama," Zoe gurgled, holding up a bright blue block, her eyes sparkling with discovery. "That's right, baby," Cassandra murmured, bending down to kiss her daughter's soft hair. Blue. Zoe was walking now, her steps gaining confidence each day, a happy, resilient child with an easy laugh and curious eyes that reminded Cassandra of her own mother's steady wisdom. The doorbell rang, and Cassandra opened it to find Linda, her arms laden with a vibrant bouquet of flowers and a brightly wrapped gift. "How's the birthday girl?" Linda asked, scooping Zoe up in a warm embrace, her face beaming. "She's perfect," Cassandra replied, "and she knows it." They were having a small, intimate party for Zoe's first birthday, just family and a few close friends. Nothing elaborate, but a heartfelt celebration of how far they had come, a milestone marking the triumph of their new life. "Any word from Roland?" Linda asked quietly as they set up decorations in the living room. "He sent a card," Cassandra said, her voice devoid of emotion. "A generic happy birthday card, his name signed at the bottom, predictably impersonal." Cassandra had stopped being angry at Roland months ago. Now, a profound sense of pity had replaced the fury. He had destroyed his entire life, his family, his career, his reputation, all for a fleeting relationship with a woman who had ultimately testified against him in exchange for a reduced sentence. Jessica, true to her self-serving nature, had ended their relationship as soon as she was charged, claiming she had been manipulated and used, severing ties with the man whose downfall she had helped orchestrate. "Does he know about the new job?" Linda probed, her eyes sparkling with pride. "I haven't told him," Cassandra replied, a confident smile on her face. "It's not really his business anymore. He chose his path, and I've chosen mine." Cassandra had recently been offered a position as department head at a prestigious private school, a role that recognized her talent and dedication. The salary was significantly higher than her previous job, and the benefits included tuition remission for Zoe when she was old enough to attend, securing her daughter's future education. "I'm so proud of you, Cassandra," Linda said, her voice thick with emotion. "Look at everything you've built, all by yourself, from nothing. You truly made a phoenix rise from the ashes." It was true. The life Cassandra had created for herself and Zoe was not the one she had planned, but it was better, richer, more authentic than anything she could have imagined during the dark, terrifying days of the divorce. She had friends who respected her, work that challenged her, a beautiful daughter who was healthy, happy, and unconditionally loved. The birthday party, though small, was filled with genuine joy. Zoe delighted in the attention, making a magnificent sticky mess with her birthday cake, her giggles infectious. Cassandra's parents had driven in from 2 hours away, their faces beaming with pride, already making plans for Christmas visits. As the guests began to leave, Cassandra's mother pulled her aside, her eyes soft with maternal warmth. "You look happy, Cassandra," she said, her voice filled with quiet observation. Really happy, not just putting on a brave face for Zoe. Cassandra looked around her house, this sanctuary she had built. Pictures of Zoe covered the refrigerator, her infectious smile a constant source of joy. Toys were scattered across the living room floor, remnants of happy play. The furniture was mismatched, a charming collection of practical pieces, but it was comfortable, lived in, theirs. Everything was exactly the way she wanted it, imperfectly perfect. "I really am happy, Mom," Cassandra confessed, a profound sense of peace settling over her. "For the first time in years, I'm exactly where I want to be. I'm living my truth, and it feels incredible." After everyone left, Cassandra gently put Zoe down for her nap and sat in the rocking chair she had bought for the nursery, her heart full. The house was quiet now, except for the soft, steady sound of Zoe's breathing over the baby monitor, a comforting lullaby. Her phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "Saw the news about your new job. Congratulations. Dinner soon to celebrate." Cassandra smiled, typing back, "Absolutely. Thank you for everything." Patricia had become more than just a lawyer. She was a friend, a mentor, a fierce advocate who had taught Cassandra that standing up for herself didn't make her vindictive or difficult. It made her strong. It made her courageous. That evening, after Zoe was soundly asleep, Cassandra sat on her front porch with a cup of tea, the gentle hum of twilight wrapping around her. She thought about the past year, about the woman she had been 12 months ago, a pregnant woman whose life was falling apart, consumed by fear and betrayal. Tonight, she was a successful single mother with a beautiful daughter, a thriving career, and a bright, expansive future stretched out before her. Her phone rang, the caller ID showing a number she didn't recognize. "Hello, Cassandra. This is Detective Morrison from the Fraud Unit. I wanted to update you on the restitution payments. Roland was legally required to pay back the money he had stolen from their joint accounts. The payments came monthly, direct deposited into a college fund for Zoe, a bittersweet form of forced provision. The payments are current," Detective Morrison reported, "and I wanted to let you know that both defendants have completed their community service requirements." "Thank you for keeping me informed, Detective," Cassandra replied, her voice calm. "How are you and your daughter doing?" "We're doing great, Detective," Cassandra replied, a genuine smile in her voice. Better than great, actually. After she hung up, Cassandra realized something profound. She felt absolutely nothing when people mentioned Roland and Jessica. Not anger, not sadness, not even curiosity about what their lives were like now. They had become footnotes in her story, distant echoes, rather than the central, all-consuming drama. They no longer held any power over her. Inside the house, Zoe woke up and started fussing, a tiny, sleepy protest. Cassandra went to her room and found her standing in her crib, clutching her favorite stuffed animal. "Hey, sleepyhead," Cassandra whispered, scooping her up. "Ready for some milk?" As she sat in the rocking chair, feeding Zoe, Cassandra thought about the future. Zoe would start walking confidently soon. She would learn to talk, to read, to ask a million questions about everything. She would go to preschool, make friends, have birthday parties, soccer games, and dance recitals. And she would grow up knowing that her mother had fought for her, that her mother had chosen truth over comfort, justice over convenience, and love over fear. "You know what, baby girl?" Cassandra whispered, as Zoe's eyes grew heavy, drifting back to sleep. "We're going to be just fine. More than fine. We're going to build something truly special." Zoe yawned and snuggled closer, her tiny hand clutching her mother's shirt. Outside, the sun was setting behind the trees in their backyard, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Inside, the house was warm, safe, and filled with an abundance of unconditional love. It wasn't the life Cassandra had planned, but it was the life she had chosen, the life she had fought for, and it was, in every meaningful way, perfect. 2 years later, Cassandra received an invitation in the mail. Her high school was inducting her into their Hall of Fame for excellence in education and community service. The ceremony would be held in the very auditorium where, as a teenager, she had first fallen in love with literature and decided to become a teacher. It felt like a lifetime ago, a distant dream from a different person. She accepted the award with 3-year-old Zoe sitting proudly in the front row, clapping enthusiastically every time someone said, "Mommy." In her acceptance speech, Cassandra talked about the importance of teaching young people to stand up for themselves, to fight for what's right, even when the odds seem insurmountable. She spoke about resilience, integrity, and the enduring power of truth to overcome deception and betrayal. She didn't mention Roland or Jessica by name, but everyone in the audience knew the story, how a pregnant woman had been betrayed and humiliated, publicly shamed by the man she loved and his mistress, but had refused to give up. How she had fought for justice, not out of vengeance, but out of a fierce, protective love for her unborn child. How she had, against all odds, won, not just a legal battle, but a profound victory for her own spirit. How she had built a beautiful, authentic life from the ashes of betrayal, forging a future defined by her own strength and values. After the ceremony, as Cassandra walked across the parking lot, holding Zoe's hand, she thought about how profoundly different her life was from what she had imagined just 5 years ago. She had expected to be married to Roland forever, raising their children together in suburban comfort, following a predictable, conventional path. Instead, she was raising an amazing daughter alone, thriving in her career, surrounded by a close-knit circle of family and friends who truly cared about her. She had learned a fundamental truth. Sometimes the life you don't plan turns out to be better, richer, and more deeply fulfilling than the life you thought you wanted. "Mommy, ice cream?" Zoe asked, tugging on her hand, her eyes wide with anticipation. "Yes, baby, we can get ice cream," Cassandra replied, a joyous smile spreading across her face. As they drove towards the ice cream shop, Cassandra caught Zoe's eye in the rearview mirror. Her daughter was singing a cheerful song she had learned in preschool, completely happy, secure, and radiating pure joy, utterly confident in the knowledge that she was loved, cherished, and safe. Jessica and Roland had tried to destroy Cassandra's life, to strip her of her dignity and her future. But in doing so, they had inadvertently given her something far greater. They had forced her to discover her own formidable strength, to tap into a well of courage she never knew she possessed. They had pushed her to fight for what truly mattered, to articulate her truth, to demand justice. They had shown her, in the most brutal way imaginable, that she was capable of building a life entirely on her own terms, a life of profound meaning and unwavering love, a life that belonged entirely to her and her daughter. The sun was shining, Zoe was giggling in her car seat, and Cassandra's future, vibrant and full of possibility, stretched ahead of them. Justice had been served, love had prevailed, and life was truly wonderfully perfectly good.